Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, October 26, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Benjamin T. Smith, professor of Latin American history at the University of Warwick, author of The Dope, The Real History of the Mexican Drug Trade. Also on the program today, surprise, budget negotiations continue as Democrats try to include some immigration reform. Meanwhile, as the White House rejiggers climate provisions to appease President Manchin, paid family and medical leave gets cut to 4 weeks. Virginia governor race is 1 week away. It's in a dead heat, ladies and gentlemen. Meanwhile, in Chicago, they're on the verge of the nation's largest basic income program. The U.S. freezes Sudanese aid in the wake of a coup there. Amazon workers in Staten Island file for union elections. The New York City cop union sues over New York's vaccine mandate. U.S. issues new travel rules into the U.S., eases up on countries that have low accessibility to vaccines. And COP26 starts in a week with breakthroughs on climate proposals unlikely. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for my partial absence yesterday. But of course, Emma Vigland was here to hold down the fort. Emma, thank you. And of course, you're here today, or I wouldn't be able to thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging my thank you.
Thank you.
The Manners Report.
What's that?
The Manners Report.
Exactly.
Good day to you, Matthew. Hello. Hello. That's, I kind of like, I was just,
British.
I was easing into Mitt Romney.
Right. Before we get to any of this, a couple of points of notice and house cleaning for this program. Housekeeping, house cleaning. It's a little house cleaning and some keeping. First off, we should tell you that this show is no longer streamed on the Peacock Network. Our contract has ended. It was a year. And so things are going to get a little bit more loosey-goosey, like the old days.
Like shit?
Oh, no, you cannot. No, that wasn't a function of Peacock.
Oh.
I don't approve of that type of language.
Okay.
No, that's not what I was saying.
I'm so sorry.
That is not appropriate. No, what I'm talking about is we're not going to hit 55 minutes every time now. That's one of the big changes. We may go back to I don't know if you remember, but back in the day, we would do like, hey, we're only doing a 20-minute free show today. If you want more, you got to get the fun half.
Keep people on their toes.
Sometimes I may go 60 minutes with a guest if I'm feeling it. I'm not going to cut them off at 55 minutes. That ain't happening anymore. Other things, no more exclusively solid shirts. I'm probably going to bring back a couple plaids, maybe a stripe shirt occasionally. Although most of those have worn out, and I didn't replace them. So don't freak out if you see me wearing like a plaid shirt like the old days. I don't know if people noticed, but my wardrobe significantly changed over the past year, where it was just solids.
Right, because of the moraying.
Because of the moraying that we would have when we were on the tube. Now, I may still hold back on going, too many plaids, but I don't want to freak anybody out.
More tank tops?
That won't happen. But people now, I know people are going to talk, and they're going to see these changes, and they're going to realize how we were under the thumb of this corporate behemoth. Mm-hmm. They like things like, ooh, interesting. Sam never wore a plaid shirt before. While they were streaming on Peacock.
We might start criticizing Democrats.
That may happen. We may end up maybe going in on Manchin. No more holding back on that. I don't know. We could possibly bring on the executive director of the WGA again, but I don't know. That would have been 3 times.
Right.
We had him on Peacock, so we had him on Peacock twice. But I just want to let people know and tell you, there was, of course. Now I can't go into the details of the contract that we had with Peacock, but I can tell you this: I've had to cut back on my private jet travel. Significantly.
I can't take a helicopter to work anymore.
That's right.
Yeah.
The jet, the helicopter, the jet, the amphibious boat truck thing I had.
Right.
I canceled my lease. But no, this is a good opportunity to remind folks that it is our members who support this program. And when you become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com, you keep the free show surviving and thriving, and then you also get the member show, which has extra content virtually every day. So it is your support that has. We have now gone from for a while, our members were supporting the show 92.3%. Back in the old days, it was closer to 99.4%, according to the CFO. And now we're back up to 98.6%.
It's also good body heat.
That's where I made it up. That I realized as soon as that came out of my mouth, I was making that up from just temperature that people take.
Right.
No, I've never been able to calculate. I wouldn't have. There's no, in a million years, we don't have any type of books that show percentages or anything like that. But
yeah.
So your support keeps the show alive. Also, if you want to sign up for the AM Quickie newsletter, well, then just go to amquickie.com and sign up for the newsletter. People are loving it. We're not quite sure where we're going to go with it. The AM Quickie, one of the things about the Peacock shows were that they were helpful in terms of supporting things like AM Quickie, which we have yet to figure out how to monetize. But we're going to be working on that. So we're not exactly sure, but sign up for it, check it out, and enjoy. And also, reminder, tickets are now on sale for Majority Report Live.
Yes.
It is, the show is at the Wilbur Theater in Boston, Massachusetts. It is Sunday, January 16th at 3 p.m. We're going to have guests and
if you were in the mood for a tropical vacation in January, too bad. You still should come to Boston.
Yeah, it didn't occur to me. I mean, I grew up in Worcester, and Worcester is a snow belt. January, Boston.
I mean, you grew up in North Dakota.
January is going to be...
I'm going to dig it. I liked... I used to go to Chicago. I went to Chicago twice in a row for January 1st, and it was just freezing both times, but you basically had the city to yourself. I'm a big fan of very cold times in major metropolitan
You've
areas.
said that to me before.
It doesn't get that cold there.
No, I understand. Yes, but my point is just it'll be fun.
All right, so all that said and done, you're going to notice some dramatic changes around here. We're no longer going to, pussyfoot around when it comes to people like Claire McCaskill, who we've been promoting so vociferously. So you're going to see some real change. We're going to be completely unleashed now.
Yeah. Sam Unchained.
I do think that there is a good chance that I'm probably going to knock down my shaving one time a week.
Oh, wow.
And that's probably going to happen. So
is that helpful for Harry's?
I mean, when I shave, it'll still be Harry's. It's just that I won't be shaving as much.
Yeah. And it'll provide such relief for everyone who's been looking at you throughout this time that they'll be like, wow, Harry's must work a lot because that guy looks so much better.
Right. I'm not sure I've totally followed. And also, this thing, this button, probably there'll be times where that. Whoa! I'm joking. All right.
It's gonna be a indoor pool. Sam's gonna.
So here, let's talk about the reconciliation bill goes on. It's going to be. We're going to be disappointed. Very disappointed. There's just no doubt in my mind. And I don't know how else to put that. And it's we're going to have to deal with it. But in the meantime, one of the things that's getting floated, in part because Kristen Sinema does not want an increase in corporate taxes.
Or the top marginal rate. Is apparently she is open to a billionaire's tax. We do not know exactly how this is framed, whether it's a wealth tax or if there's some type of like big donut hole, or we just don't know. Ron Wyden's been working on it in the Senate for 2 years, but nobody's seen any documents about it. It has been one of those things that's been sitting on the shelf, or at least been being worked on a shelf. Ron Wyden's been in the lab with a pen and a pen working on that billionaire tax.
But broadly speaking, the idea of billionaires paying more money, frankly, I would like a wealth tax. I would like to go in and take their wealth. Not because we need it to fund things, but because we have a real problem, not just with wealth inequality in this country, but the political inequality that wealth inequality gives birth to. We have gone from a plutonomy to a plutocracy. And who better to critique the idea of billionaires getting taxed more than a 100-millionaire himself, Mitt Romney?
Oh, here he goes.
Well, first of all, it's not a good idea to tell billionaires, don't come to America, don't start your business here, to tell the Steve Jobs and the Bill Gates and people like that, this isn't the place to begin your business, go somewhere else. That's a bad idea. But number two, you're going to tax people not when they sell something, but just when they own it and the value goes up. And what that means is that these multi-billionaires are going to look and say, I don't want to invest in the stock market because as that goes up, I'm going to get taxed. So maybe I will instead invest in a ranch or in paintings or things that don't build jobs and create a stronger economy.
Okay, two things. Let's work backwards to front. Investing in making money in the stock market, that does not create jobs. That does not create jobs. There is no, there may be a very loose sort of trajectory correlation between how the stock market's doing and the number of jobs that are added. But that is super, super loose and in no way is causal.
Maybe some more sweaty stock traders on the floor of the
maybe a dozen people get more jobs.
But
maybe
that's
there's more,
like the top line number.
And ranches and paintings. I mean, like, for Mitt Romney, who has several $100 million, I'm not exactly sure how much his wealth is. He, as sort of plebe as he is relative to a billionaire, must understand the concept that, like, they can afford the taxes. It's not going to change their spending behavior whatsoever. And Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, I want to remind Mitt Romney, were not billionaires when they started their company. But yes, if you are a billionaire, I would be in favor of you should not come to America.
In fact, I would be in favor of you should not only not come to America, you should not have American citizenship. And you're not allowed to lobby or even own companies that are allowed to lobby in this country. Can we do that? Is Romney suggesting we can do that? Because if we can, I will sign up for that.
You know how Joseph Kennedy sort of like his whole story in the New Deal was, or I guess after the Great Depression was he was the inside man helping to show where the bodies are buried on Wall Street, and that's how he could help it. Well, Romney could play that role, but instead he's saying it's just impossible because they're going to spend it in ranches and paintings. Well, how about you have some provisions about those sorts of money laundering or flight from taxes? You could tax paintings and ranches and stuff like that if you wanted to.
Listen, there are ways in which to do this. And I think I'm not exactly sure what provision of the billionaire's tax he's talking about. We don't know that one. I mean, he must have.
I don't think we know again, Wyden's working on it. We don't know the exact language. We know it's going to raise a lot less than increasing corporate taxes and the top marginal rate would.
I'm less concerned about raising the money, and I am more in favor of inhibiting people owning and monopolizing money.
Yeah, leveling, basically.
Exactly.
That's fine. I do think that this is less structural, and that's why someone like Sinema is in favor of it, and I think that that's obvious.
To me, it's more structural. It is basically saying we're not going to allow, and we need to see how but we're not going to allow billionaires or multi-billion. I mean, I would like to basically any money that you have over, let's say, I don't know, let's just ease people into this. Any money you have over 900 million. And I know that's a shock to a lot of people. You get taken away. It gets taken away. You're not allowed to, you get up to 800 million, 900 million, then I think you're done. You're done.
And then you might have to hire more delivery drivers and, allow some more of your deliverers to take bathroom breaks if you're Jeff Bezos, for instance.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Now, I think what he's talking about is a mark-to-market assessment of the capital that you own. And that gets taxed. I don't know if that would happen on a yearly basis. But, we have a model for that. And it is called real estate taxes. It exists. You get taxed on the value of your home as assessed by a local tax assessor. And so we can do this. We'll get to the other Mitt Romney thing later. But I'm all in favor of billionaire tax. I'm all in favor of a tax that eliminates billionaires.
I'm all in favor of billionaire taxes as a supplement, is all I'm saying.
Well, I say ban them from entering the country, too.
In fact, deport them.
We
are
a
pro-deportation of billionaires show here.
Yeah, or you can just shed yourself of the billions, and then I actually, in at least right now, am more in favor, I think, of confiscatory taxing of billionaires. I don't know if this would be that, than even the raising of corporate taxes. The individual income tax, I would like to see higher as well. But all right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Benjamin Smith, professor of Latin American history at the University of Warwick, author of The Dope, The Real History of the Mexican Drug Trade. But first, I just want to remind you that Danny, who is my solar nerd, he can be your solar nerd, but he is located at mysolarnerd.com. He is a solar consultant, longtime fan and listener of this program, was working with other companies that do solar. Some of them he found were a little predatory in their practices. You get involved in a lease, and the structure of the lease is such that you're sort of locked in for a long period of time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He started a solar consultancy business to make sure that people didn't fall into those type of traps, and also to help people navigate the different tax benefits and find contractors to do this. There's a lot of different solar options that are currently available. Most homeowners don't have any idea what to do. You can now retrofit a home with solar panels for no money down, And most homeowners that switch over to solar see significant savings starting in their first year. And this is possible because of a tax that has been extended with COVID into next year. It is the Solar Investor Tax Credit. It is a 26% tax credit. It is extended through next year, then it drops to 22% in 2023. My Solar Nerd's mission is simple. It helps you find the best solar program for your home. Make the transition as easy and smooth as possible. How do they do it? They analyze your usage. They find the best equipment for your needs. Maybe you need these type of panels, maybe for hot water heat, whatever it is. They determine the incentives and financing that you might qualify for. They project manage the whole process between you and the installers. They obtain the permits, et cetera, et cetera. Now, look, some of those tax credits and incentives are going to sunset at one point. 26% tax credit will drop down to 22% in 2003. And then there are some markets, which, of course, you will know this, are prone to power outages. You may qualify for off-the-grid backup solutions. Majority Report listeners will get a $200 gift card upon installation of their solar system. Go to mysolarnerd.com, fill out the inquiry form now. Make sure you select Majority Report listener for how you heard about mysolarnerd.com to receive that $200 gift card upon installation. And also, just to let Danny know that it's getting the word out on the show. Check it out. It is worth sussing out if you can have some savings on solar power. Good time to do it right now with that 26% tax credit floating around out there. All right. Want to welcome to the show Professor of Latin American History at the University of Warwick, author of The Dope, The Real History of the Mexican Drug Trade, Benjamin Smith. Welcome to the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Sam.
I'm here with Emma Vigeland. So I want to just start with, I think sort of the title begs for this question. The real history of the Mexican drug trade. What's the fake history? What's the myth that we have been led to believe all these years?
Well, I think really for 100 years, both the drug authorities, the kind of nowadays the DEA and the US authorities and the Mexican authorities have essentially portrayed the drug war as a kind of pretty easy moral binary. On the one hand, you've got good cops who are trying to save your children from addiction. And on the other hand, you have a kind of evil cabal of mostly brown Mexican cartel members who are trying to addict your children. So this is a kind of easy moral binary into which our stories of the drug trade and the war on drugs fit pretty easily. And you can see them in popular films today or in Netflix series or any of these kind of cultural forms.
Is this myth a north of the border myth, or is this myth like one that initiated in the U.S. and then sort of did its own migration to Mexico? I mean, when we say this myth exists, and it exists for the past 100 years, let's say, and sort of conveniently around the time where we started to limit immigration in this country, is the myth shared in Mexico? Like what, or to the extent that it is now, when did that happen?
That's a very good question. So essentially, when there was a massive expansion of the drug trade during the 1960s and 1970s, basically when the counterculture, the hippies, started to get high and started to import vast quantities of weed, and then by the late 1970s, heroin into the United States. At that point, the American kind of mythology over the evil drug trafficker was effectively imported into Mexico. I suppose what's interesting about Mexico is still to this day, there is a kind of folk heroization of the drug trafficker, which is a kind of counterpoint to this kind of evil mythology, this easy moral binary. So people like Chapo, for many people in Sinaloa, is a hero, even though he is, derided as a kind of evil figure in the United States and in official media in Mexico as well.
I want to circle back to that, but just will you tell us
the extent. I mean, your reporting was pretty extensive for this. I think that's a little bit of an understatement. Will you just outline for us, sort of like, you know, what you looked at as you were writing this book? And we should say this is, you know, ultimately a history of the development of those myths in many respects. But what exactly did you do in terms of the reporting for this book?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm a historian, as you can tell from the accent. I'm from Britain. I've been studying, I'm a kind of doctor in history at a place called Warwick, but I've been studying Mexico for 20 odd years. And really, since the beginning of this particularly aggressive version of the war on drugs that's led to around 200,000 people dead over the last 15 years. And really for the last decade, I've been looking at the history of the trade and the history of the war against that trade. So this has involved going to about 40 or 50 archives. It's involved tracking down DEA agents. It's involved tracking down old hippie weed smugglers. And it's involved speaking to dozens of people involved in pretty much every echelon of the drug trade now and over the last 20 or 30 years. So yeah, it's been I'm not going to say a labor of love, but it's been a pretty long-term project, which has led to this book.
Let's start with, as we you know, and if there are figures that you feel like, you know, you obviously want to introduce, but there's a couple that stood out for me. Just starting with 1908, where you basically start your book with the King of the Stoners. Tell us about him and how, what was the trade at that point?
So I think there's a kind of assumption that Mexico has always had a kind of fairly strong subculture or even culture of marijuana smoking, but in actual fact, it was pretty rare. And it still to this day, far fewer Mexicans smoke marijuana than the percentages in the US or so. Starting in the 20th century, the early 20th century, however, there was a small growing industry in smoking marijuana, mostly among prisoners and soldiers, like in the barracks, where they basically were prevented from bringing in booze, so they smoked weed instead. And the so-called King of the Stoners, a guy called Jose del Moral, was really the first kind of major wholesaler of marijuana. He brought it in from the countryside, probably the state of Guanajuato, brought it into Mexico City, and then sold it to the kind of folk healers who would flog it on as a kind of medicine, and also flogging it into the prisons itself. I mean, what is interesting is that he gets put in prison. He gets one of the first kind of convictions of Mexico's own war on drugs, and he writes this incredibly eloquent defense of marijuana as a kind of medicinal product, which seems remarkably modern for 1908. So yeah, I kind of start with this figure who I suppose shows the kind of paradoxes at the heart of this kind of war on drugs, that so many people who flog the drugs or take the drugs don't see them necessarily as deeply harmful, but rather as basically medicinal products.
And how did that fit into the United States' rebranding of, say, cannabis into the much scarier marijuana? Because, like, one of the great through lines of your book is how these myths perpetuate U.S. nativism as it relates to Mexico. And that seems to be one of the starting points of that dynamic.
I mean, this is fascinating. I'm not going to claim to have discovered this. There's a wonderful historian called Isaac Campos who did this really kind of 5-10 years ago. But essentially, it is Mexico that comes up with the idea of reefer madness. Mexican elites who are worried about their prisoners and their soldiers smoking weed, and they believe that smoking weed leads to really serious acts of violence, basically to murder. Now, the Americans don't have a problem with weed smoking, really don't have a problem with weed smoking until the 1960s. But in the 1930s, a man called Harry Anslinger, who was head of effectively the pre-DEA, something called the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, he's basically about to lose his job. He finds himself without a kind of war to fight. So he imports these Mexican fears over marijuana and makes them and basically implants them in the white middle class in the United States. So that's where your reefer madness comes from. That's where your paranoid fear of weed smoking Mexicans come from. It's actually imported from Mexican elites that came up with this in the early 1900s.
And why did that? What was the theory of them coming up with it? I mean, was there any type of like farming that was going on at that time? I mean, what, like, was this just grown like people would grow, I don't know, basil in their backyard or something like that? I mean, how much of a production was there to the extent that there was? I mean, was this a commodity at that time? Or at what point within Mexico does it become a commodity?
So during the early kind of 20th century, there is an expansion of marijuana use, basically because there are more soldiers under arms, because Mexico has this big revolution from 1910 to 1920, and lots more people are basically soldiers stuck in barracks. So no doubt the amount of marijuana smoked by Mexicans does increase, but it never gets out of hand. And it never really percolates up into the United States. So I would say outside Mexico City, which is the biggest city at the time, there are about 10 or 12 villages that are devoted to growing really, really small crops of marijuana, certainly not an acre worth in each village. So really small amounts. Where it really takes off, and it's tantamount almost to an oil boom, is the late 1960s. So effectively when America starts smoking weed, and hundreds of thousands of hippies and student holiday makers come down to Mexico and basically start asking for marijuana. And this creates a huge boom in marijuana growing throughout Mexico. And there you get pretty much every state up in the mountains is growing weed for the US market. So that's the radical growth, kind of 65 through to 70.
All right. Before we get to that era, let's talk about the 1940 experiment that then Mexican President Cardenas legalized pot for 4 months. Why did he initiate that experiment, and why did it last so? Why was it so short?
Well, this is kind of depressing, but at the same time, quite redolent story of relations between Mexico and the US and drugs. So essentially, there's this brilliant Mexican doctor who comes up with the idea of legalizing pot. Now, they don't quite manage to push that through, although the government seems to support him. But his other idea is to completely decriminalize morphine. And instead of the drug traffickers making loads of money by selling heroin and morphine to these poor addicts, instead, the government would give away heroin and morphine for free or for a very, very low price at state morphine clinics. So the idea being that this would basically get rid of drug traffickers and drug dealers, and instead the state could treat these addicts and help them recover. Now, it seemed to me this was a fairly good idea, and one that has been repeated now in certain other places around the world. However, again, Harry Anslinger, the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, thinks it's a spectacularly bad idea. And as a result, he cuts off Mexico from importing any morphine. Now, this means that the Mexican addicts can't get any morphine through this government program, but it also means that thousands of Mexicans die in abject pain in their hospital beds without any pain relief. This doesn't matter, however, it basically forces the Mexicans to stop their experiment. And as a result, he starts allowing morphine going back into the country halfway through 1940. So it's a short-lived experiment, one that perhaps kind of indicates a possible better future, but one that unfortunately, never really took off.
Let's talk about this dynamic as we get into the 60s and it becomes a much bigger commodity, and we start to see, although this dynamic on some level predates, how big of a commodity it becomes in the 60s. When you talk about the violence, I mean, this is one of the things that I think, ran through the book, was that the violence is not a function of the drugs.
It is a function of the black market nature of the drugs. And there were two elements. One is sort of walk us through how that works, because, and also start with, I guess, the dynamic of how Mexican officials, and before we get into the 60s and 70s, we're talking about really on the state level. They weren't exactly corrupt. Some people were, but there was basically a black market tax. Explain that dynamic.
It's a really good way to put it, Sam, a black market tax. So effectively, I think part of the whole kind of drug war mythology is that Mexican officials have basically taken drug money to look the other way, that Mexican officials are effectively corrupt and they built gargantuan houses or bought luxurious yachts with this money. But one thing I think, and I think to a certain extent, I, like many others, had a very similar vision. But one thing I was really surprised to find was quite how much of that effectively at the local level, local mayors, local governors, local cops would effectively charge drug traffickers a certain percentage of their profits not to prosecute them. But they would then use this money actually to build up the state. So they would build railways and roads and schools with this money. Yes, some of them would pocket it, but a lot of them didn't. And one thing that I think really, really shocked me was finding documents where the US investigated this, and the US was shocked. The US found that the state cops would shake down, would basically extort these drug traffickers in return for protection. But they would take the money and they would give it straight to the state tax collector. So this is kind of how it works. So I call these, I think corruption is not a terribly useful word because it's a kind of loaded moral term. We always think of corruption as bad. So I just called it's basically a protection racket. It's basically the state, the local cops and the local governors were protecting the drug traffickers in return for, as you rightly say, a black market tax.
Who are they? And I imagine the shock from the United States was more like, wait, and you're putting this into the commons, essentially? But who are they protecting them from? I mean, they were protecting them from the state ultimately too, right? It's basically just, so if there was this notion of like the state officials are like, look, if this was legal, you'd be paying us a tax. So we're going to sort of decriminalize it for a tax, because that's what it is, right? I mean, it's a tax in the sense that it's going into the tax coffers. Why was there not the ability on a political level just to sort of formalize that relationship and make it not so, like black markety?
So effectively, so you ask it, I mean, that you started that initially with, okay, if the authorities are protecting him, who are they protecting him against? So effectively, they were protecting him against two groups. One is the United States, which particularly during the 1950s become increasingly, gets increasingly involved in other countries and particularly Mexico's drug policy, and then actually forces Mexico to put in place some really punitive laws. So state governors go, we won't put you in jail for 15 years, right? Because that is what the Americans want the Mexicans to do. The other group is, there are people in the federal administration. Mexico, like the United States, is a federation, right, with states. But there are people at the kind of level of the cabinet or the level of the president or the level of the head federal police who do want to put these drug traffickers in prison. So these local authorities basically protect the drug traffickers against those two groups.
Okay, fair enough. And then as we go into the 60s and 70s, I guess it is. Okay. And then the other thing, let me just stay on this. On the other thing that's causing this violence is the war on drugs and the sort of cartel wars, which in many respects was a function of the DEA. Is that right? Explain that dynamic.
Yeah, so I think I, like many other people, had assumed that the leaders of these cartels were naturally kind of selfish capitalists who attempted to kind of monopolize the traffic of drugs throughout Mexico. So you would have the Sinaloa cartel that would fight the Gulf cartel for control of trafficking through a particular area. But one thing that I found looking at the history of the trade is that basically most of the time, drug traffickers cooperate, basically because drug trafficking necessitates basically networks of people that will traffic the drugs through particular routes. Now, what I found out over the last kind of 20 years or so, which seems upshoot in what looks like cartel violence, it is often either the DEA or the federal Mexican authorities that are managing to basically divide the cartels against one another, principally by catching somebody like Chapo and forcing Chapo to rat out another part of his group, another wing of his cartel. So they would effectively create these breaks in cartels by using informants and then wedge open these divisions. And in actual fact, the DE had a term for it. They called it divide and conquer. So what looks like these cartels at each other's throats over the drug trade is often them fighting the DEA's own wars for them. I think this was, to me, was the most shocking, really.
I mean, that to me is just sort of fascinating insofar as like that is a strategy where they get them fighting amongst each other, because there's no evidence that in any way weakens the industry, does it? I mean, it sort of feels like what is the value of that ultimately? Well, I mean, I guess this is sort of point of the book too on some of us.
I mean, it's a really good question. But basically, the point of it is the DEA can go and give a PowerPoint presentation to other people in Washington saying, look, classically between 2012 and 2018, Mexico arrested 130, were arrested or killed, or were killed, 130 out of 140 so-called kingpins. And the DEA's budget increased commensurately during those 6 years, and did the budget of the federal police in Mexico, and did the budget of the army as well in Mexico. What did this actually do to drug addiction? Absolutely nothing. In actual fact, the price of coke and heroin went down during that period, and the amount of people overdosing on US streets went up during that period. So the DEA has never really had any real interest in overdoses or the ease of getting drugs in America. What it is very good at is selling its war as a victory, and showing these kind of dead capos and Chapo in jail was good publicity.
Well, then it doesn't make it necessarily functionally different than any one of the wars that the United States is waging throughout other areas of the globe. You can just see this as an extension of U.S. empire, except you can make drugs the amorphous enemy as budgets go up and people get to feel like they're warriors for the good empire, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it's got a lot of parallels with the kind of war on terrorism. This kind of amorphous enemy that you can never really conquer, that you continually name, right? You continually have these dreadful terrorists that are manipulating everything, that are pulling all the puppet strings. Then you get rid of them. Then you sell that as a success, but you still have to wage the war on terrorism. So you still need the budget to be increased. And it's very similar with the war on drugs.
Let's talk about the back in the 60s.
It's getting dark here. I'm going to put the light on, if that's all right.
Oh, definitely.
Yes. And if maybe you could just tilt your camera just a little bit, maybe just angle it so that the light's not behind you directly.
Yes, okay, that's better. Is that better?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great. So in the 60s, the drug business gets professionalized by a guy named Pedro Aviles Perez. That is presumed, or at least I guess the legend was that he was El Chapo's godfather. But that was not, I don't know if that was really apocryphal or what, but how did they professionalize? Like at that point, like what does that mean to professionalize it?
Yeah, so effectively, rather than the traffickers being really kind of small-scale operators that would essentially have a network of kind of maybe 5, 10, mostly family members that actually knew the people who were growing the opium poppies, often either were or knew the chemists personally. They were family members who were making that opium into heroin, and then knew the people who had a kind of stash house on the border. Maybe another family member who would actually traffic the stuff across. Now, what this man, Pedro Aviles Perez, does is he does two things. Essentially, one, he brings together marijuana and heroin trafficking that up to that point to be completely separate. And he creates this huge network of border warehouses where he stores weed and heroin from all over Mexico. So if you're a trafficker down in southern Mexico, you come up to his warehouses, sell to him, and he smuggles the stuff over the border. And he has a fleet of aeroplanes. So I suppose he is the modern version of what becomes known as a kingpin. So he is, I think, pretty responsible for this kind of modernization of the trade. And you're right, there are certain myths that he was the godfather of Chapo. He knew Chapo. I don't think necessarily that's true. I think Chapo did have relatives involved in the trade, but the principal one being a guy called Silvino Guzman. I don't think Pedro Aviles was very close to him.
And it was around that time, maybe a little bit later, that that dynamic with state police and state institutions being sort of like collecting these black market tax sort of it becomes federal at that point, that the Mexican federal government essentially starts to maintain that same dynamic with drug dealers. Give us a sense of, like, when we talk about this drug trade, and I imagine it's shifted. Well, and I know it's shifted over the years, but what are we talking about in terms of like pot versus heroin versus cocaine? I mean, what is the dynamic there? Is it just simply when the U.S. cracks down on heroin, coke sales go up? When the U.S. cracks down on pot, heroin goes. Is that basically how it works?
Pretty much. I kind of term it's the kind of emergency supplier for the United States. So when basically drugs are not easily available from another place, Mexico will provide for them. So there are times when you're right, marijuana isn't selling terribly well from Mexico because there's better quality stuff from Jamaica or Colombia during the late 1970s. But then as soon as that supply is closed down, Mexico steps in. Again, Mexican heroin is not thought of as terribly good during the 1970s. So they get most of the stuff from either Thailand or from, essentially from kind of France, from Turkey via France. But when those are closed down, again, Mexico steps in with kind of Mexican mud or kind of brown Mexican heroin. So yeah, it's a kind of emergency supply, and so it's always produced weed, it's always produced heroin and morphine, and it's always been a key transshipment point for cocaine. There was, late 90s, it was trafficking somewhere in the region of 95% of America's cocaine, and America was taking about 70% of the world's cocaine. So there was a lot of coke.
We were really number one. That was not.
Yeah. You've lost out now to Brazil and Western Europe. So I think that as a victory.
We may get back there. Lastly, I want to compare Nieto to the current president, Lopez Obrador. Tell us about that dynamic and how that has shifted, and how Obrador seemed to come in with one agenda but is exercising another. Let's go through that, and before we get to where this is going to lead, to the extent that we know.
Okay, so effectively, AMLO, Lopez Obrador, comes to power with a slogan, which is hugs, not bullets. So the idea being that we are not going to viciously, violently police the drug trade, but instead we're going to offer social and economic opportunities to the kind of young men who get pulled into this kind of violent crime. So on the surface, I think instinctively, he has some quite interesting instincts. And I think, at least initially, his attempt was to do effectively two things. One, not pursue the policy of basically allowing the DEA to come down and divide and conquer cartels. So basically not taking out kingpins, which they've been doing for about a decade. So I think that was quite good. And he has effectively stopped, right? There have been no kingpins that have been arrested over the last 3 years. In actual fact, 2 years ago, they did arrest Chapo's son. And Chapo's son threatened to basically blow up the city where he had been caught, or certainly kill the families of the people who caught him. And the president stepped down. He let him go. So Chapo's son still lives relatively openly in northern Mexico. So on the one hand, he's doing that. He's also attempted to offer more social and economic opportunities for the young, particularly of borderlands Mexico. This has been, two major problems. One, COVID, and two, not terribly successful economy over the last 3 years, then made worse by COVID. So this isn't working. But I think the most confusing thing about AMLO is that, having said originally that he would put the military back in the barracks, again, that was one of his slogans. In actual fact, he seems now even more closely allied to the military, really, than any other president since perhaps the 1970s. He's not only very close to the kind of military generals, they've been given control of customs, control of border crossings, control of a lot of the kind of things that had previously been done by the bureaucracy. And at the same time, he's come up with this, 150,000 strong National Guard, which is, again, under the control of the military. So what is quite worrying, I think.
What is driving that? I mean, is that pressure from the United States? Is our relaxation of drug laws in this country, to the extent that we have? I mean, marijuana is largely legal through many parts of the country and decriminalized, and they're just not the same level of marijuana prohibition in this country that there was even 2 years ago. Has that had an impact? Why is AMLO so aggressively sort of building this military? What's that about?
Right. So first question about marijuana. The effects that marijuana decriminalization, legalization in America had in Mexico were really counterproductive and incredibly depressing. Effectively, Mexican cartels did two things. One, they got involved in producing meth, heroin, and over the last 2 years, something called fentanyl, which is about 50 times stronger than heroin, which is killing, about 100,000 Americans per year. The second thing they got involved in is other forms of organized crime. So now you go to rural areas of Mexico where previously peasants had grown weed. They hadn't been paid very much for it, but they'd been paid much better than they got paid for, normal crops. And they could keep the cartels at kind of arm's length. Nowadays, the cartels are coming into their village. They're kidnapping them. They're extorting them. They're extorting little mum and pup kind of shops. They're extorting avocado growers and lime growers. Basically, organized crime has moved into much more socially destructive forms of violence, basically. So that's what marijuana's done, not necessarily marijuana legalization has done, not necessarily improved things, sadly. The second thing you ask is, why has he got so involved in the military, or why has he kind of militarized Mexico? Well, partially, I think he doesn't trust the federal police. He thinks the federal police were institutionally corrupt, that they worked for the previous administrations, which were not from his party. So instead, he sees the military as relatively more honest than the police, but also not tainted by strong connections to previous administrations. He sees them as a much more neutral force than necessarily the police. So I think that's why he is putting more stock by the military than the police. But it's a pretty dangerous game to play, in my opinion.
So if we're in a situation where theoretically the United States could legalize all drugs, theoretically anyways, and there has been too much growth in institutional sort of like edification of these crime syndicates, just so that they will move into other more inherently violent crimes, right? I mean, kidnapping is the process of kidnapping and extorting and paying protection money is far more violent inherently than drug trafficking, which, just involves, we have a ledger and we have logistics and we need drivers. I mean, it's like it's basically like distribution of bread, as it were, if it wasn't for the sort of the black market aspect of it. So, is there some type of solution? How would do you just like approach these syndicates and say, look, here's a one-time payment of $10 billion and you guys, here's your retirement. Consider this your gold watch type of situation. But how do you deal with this if you can no longer sort of legalize your way out of it, as it were?
I think that's a really good question that I suspect AMLO is pulling his hair out over. I mean, so sadly, despite the fact his instincts were relatively good, as I say, he did basically make de facto agreements with some of these cartels. He did attempt to kind of help kind of young men out in the kind of border neighborhoods. Unfortunately, murders still went up, but it must be said over the last 3 months or so, I think murders have started to go down in Mexico, which is the first time for, I think it must be 8 years or so. So potentially, he is actually doing something right. But it's a really good question. How do you stop these other socially destructive forms of crime, like kidnapping, extortion, and sex trafficking and human trafficking? I mean, I confess that I think I have a particularly bleak version of what is going on in Mexico that perhaps is not entirely fair. So I spend a lot of my time dealing with refugees who are running away from Mexico, coming to the United States and asking for asylum. So these are people, the vast majority, who are not involved in the drug trade. The vast majority are basically poor people kicked off their land by some organized criminal who, yes, calls himself a member of a cartel. But I mean, bar smoking a bit of weed, I doubt he's ever trafficked anything. So this is what's going on in Mexico. So I think I do have a very kind of bleak vision of what's going on. There are clearly places in Mexico which are very safe, that are safer than than most American cities. So this violence is concentrated in certain places, no doubt. So I'm not sure if I've given you a solution there or just a depressing litany of other things.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things we like to specialize in around here. Depressing litany. That was we were debating as to whether we should name the show that. But Benjamin Smith, the book is The Real History of the Mexican Drug Trade. Thanks so much for your time today. Really fascinating. Really appreciate it.
Cheers. Appreciate it.
Bye. All right, folks. That concludes the free portion of our program for today. You will notice finally yoked the corporate. What am I looking for? Yoke? How am I using yoke?
That's right. The yoke, the corporate yoke.
Yes. We no longer have to have that fake pause where we go take a pause and come back and wrap it up for the Peacock people.
With that said, to our Peacock audience, we say goodbye.
Yes. Forever.
Mm-hmm.
Of course,
signing off.
This is not on Peacock today, so I guess I wasn't sure when that was going to end.
Right, it just kind of did.
It just kind of did. I knew it was around this time.
I don't even think it was on yesterday, but just to be sure,
no, it wasn't.
We weren't sure.
No, I think yesterday was the first day it wasn't on. Yeah.
So I did say goodbye to the Peacock audience.
Yeah. No, I thought we were going to the 30th. But it turns out we went to the 25th or whatever. But that's all right. We gave him a little extra on that year.
I think a year and 2 weeks or whatever it was.
By the way, you know that Harry Anslinger came up in that interview?
Yeah.
And he knew of a congressperson who was addicted to heroin, and he didn't go public with that person's name because of the damage it would do to the West. Do you know who that congressperson was?
No.
Joseph McCarthy.
Wow.
That was in the Johann Hari book.
Wow.
I thought you were going to say Dick Cheney. Wow. You know, so much, I'm quite convinced, of the sort of insanity that we talk about on this show, particularly when it comes to like other people in this sort of sphere that we deal with in particular, I think can be attributed to some form of substance abuse or another.
Some people, yeah.
I have my theories. Anyways, folks, maybe they come up in the fun half.
Yes.
Maybe they don't.
What a teaser.
There's only one way to find out. Become a member today. Go to jointhemajority.report.com. Become a member today. Also, AM Quickie. You can find it at amquickie.com and justcoffee.coop. Justcoffee.coop is, in fact, not just coffee. Also, Nomi will not be joining us today because of weather. She couldn't fly. She's something. But check out her show, youtube.com/The Nomiki Show. Matt.
Sorry, there's something going on with our YouTubes.
Something's up with the stream? What's going on?
I think we might be back now, hopefully. There's F's in chat, but...
We're back?
Yeah, I think we're back. Everything looks fine, so hopefully it was just a minor interruption.
Okay.
But,
All right.
yeah, what is happening on Left Reckoning? We're talking to Ben Burgess about his debate with Charlie Kirk, and going to talk about his upcoming book on Christopher Hitchens, who was kind of central to both David and I's intellectual development, and who now we've sort of graduated beyond. So we're interested to talk to Ben about his book. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get that.
It's interesting. He's doing a book on Hitchens? I didn't know
yeah.
that. Boy, yeah. I took a journey with that dude.
Yeah.
Like his stuff on Kissinger, he was just like a hero.
He was nailing it with Kissinger, pretty good with the Clintons too.
Yeah,
and then Mother Teresa, and he's generally good on Marxism early in the 80s, and then kind of, I don't know.
And then he really wanted to go to Iraq.
Yeah,
and
made some connections with some like
at one point
type folks.
We were just saying at one point the booze just becomes, the party starts to wrap up a little bit, and that booze doesn't get you drunk as much as it does get you insane. And by the early aughts, Hitch is he was pretty he was pretty soaked. Let's put it that way.
Also, I just want to shout out.
Brain's not so malleable.
That was well documented. But...
yeah, he was always drunk. If you hear like stories of him and like pre-tapings of stuff, and he's always just soused. But I do want to also shout out Brian Kerr, who in the chat said, for what it's worth, Peacock is how he found the Majority Report. So
is that right?
Yeah,
wow.
I'm interested to hear. Yeah, anybody who is in that same boat, sound off.
Oh yeah, please do, because I got to be honest, I didn't think anybody like that existed.
It's the first I've heard.
Never, ever, ever got that sense. And now it makes me wonder, did we do the right thing by...
I was about to say.
It's like after a breakup, you find a little memento.
Exactly.
Or you see like on Instagram, oh, they're really having a great time.
Yeah, wait a second.
Who's that in the background?
Wow, that's...
Take me back.
Hey guys, it's Sam. Listen, what like I noticed, like you're just doing like a perspective, like like MSA, like what do you? Okay. Anyways, see you in the fun half. 646-257-3920.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back.
is back, and the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back, and the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs that look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them. Snowflake says what?
What?
Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the famous fun half. Hey, I'm Mark Cruz says out of state Maine. First off, the handle is pronounced how someone from Maine would have said would say out of state Maine. Sam has mumbled through it in the past. Anyways, I'm a contractor and doing some finished carpentry today. I prefer regular pencils and not the wide ones. Those are for farmers who are less accurate. Got any regular pencils with the MR logo? You know what? That seems like a slam dunk to me. They're like, why don't we have Majority Report pens and pencils? Could sell them as a set.
Well, we did the thing where we did the the very old-fashioned pencils.
Well, that's what he was just saying. He doesn't like those carpenter pencils because, and I understand this, you can only sharpen them so much because the lead is quite large. Now, this guy's a finished carpenter, so he needs a thin line, not like the thicker lines where we're using like a table saw with a much wider blade or something like that. This guy's probably doing Japanese joinery up in Maine. Those maniacs up there. They're doing that Japanese joinery. Where'd you learn that? From YouTube? All right.
Can you learn that stuff through YouTube?
Yes.
Because I've always wanted to know how they do that. Those,
oh my God.
Fittings. It's insane.
Dude, I'm wiring in my apartment right now. I'm putting in a recessed. I got a light switch. It's plaster walls. so it's not drywall. So I can't cut a hole in and fish the thing through, and I'm certainly not going to replaster this wall. So I'm running from a light switch, a raceway down, turn in the corner, and putting a new outlet up there, and I'm doing it all through YouTube. I mean, or I'm going to get electrocuted and die.
Yeah. Well, those YouTube things are amazing. Like, I mean, I had a friend that like just taught himself multiple instruments and was composing music just by learning to play the piano.
Oh. This is what we were talking about yesterday with like how the average person could build a competency to all sorts of different skills if they were just given the leisure
of smartness.
Yes.
We were just, I mean, it's a personal pet peeve of mine when smartness is like, I mean, but they're smart. You know, if they're a horrible person, I don't care. I don't care.
I mean, even if they put it on YouTube. Star Fox. Sam, what is the name of the podcast you mentioned when you went on to discuss the film Singles? I never discussed this film Singles. No, it was Reality Bites. And it was with Trevor. What's his?
Trevor Bolu of the Champagne Sharks.
But it wasn't. Was it on Champagne Sharks?
I think so, wasn't it?
Yeah. Look at Champagne Sharks. I think that's. I think he had a separate series, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, he did. I forget what that series is called, but it is a.
But if you go to Champagne Sharks,
it's like the White Cannon or something like that.
Yes, the White Cannon. That's what it was. All right, calling from a 206 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Pep.
It's what?
From Washington State.
Pat in Washington State. Pep?
Yeah, Pep.
Pep in Washington State. What's on your mind, Pep? Drive carefully, will you?
Yes, thanks. I'm driving across Pennsylvania right now.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm calling to talk about my girlfriend who lives in Mexico. She's Mexican. She lives in the state of Puebla, which is probably second. It's about a few hours southeast of Mexico City, and in terms of COVID, it's been about second in terms of high case numbers. At any rate, I wanted to share with you her experience with visas and vaccines in the last couple of years.
Okay.
So she had a 10-year tourist visa. She's a teacher in Mexico and then would travel to the United States in the summer to do things related to her teaching career. And she had a renewal come up in December 2019, and that renewal was scheduled. The meeting was scheduled for March of 2020. Obviously, the pandemic hit, and the visa renewal was kicked 6 months down the line. Then that 6-month renewal was kicked another 6 months down the line, effectively a year later, and well, essentially she's still in that process. Then sidestepping to getting a vaccine. She's had a hard time getting a vaccine there. The vaccines come to town for periods of time. Certain people are able to get them or not. If you show up, you get it. If you miss it, you miss it.
Is there a scarcity of vaccines in Mexico?
What was that about the vaccine in Mexico?
Is there a scarcity of vaccines in Mexico?
Yeah, there's definitely a scarcity of vaccines. There have been. So they would show up periodically, and you would get it if you could. If you were assigned, that was your assigned date. She's in her mid-30s, so she obviously was not in the first few rounds. And what she started to consider as she was realizing the difficulty of getting the vaccine is, once you have an opportunity to get it, you get it. But the vaccines they're offering there are, for the most part, Sinovac and the Sputnik. And if you're lucky, you can find a Pfizer or an AstraZeneca. And what she realized was that if the vaccine that came up that was assigned to her was a Sputnik or a Sinovac, even if she does get a visa renewal, she won't be able to come back to the States because they won't recognize those vaccines. And I suddenly started to where we started to realize that we haven't heard a lot of conversation about that particular issue, and when, if ever, the border will be open to people that don't have vaccines that are approved by the CDC. And she finally did find an opportunity to get the vaccine, and was able to have a doctor write her a note saying that she needed either AstraZeneca or Pfizer due to a condition.
Right.
And she was able to get AstraZeneca. But her parents, who were only able to get Sinovac, who had wanted to eventually come to see the United States someday, are realizing that they may not be able to. And also a lot of young people who are not necessarily thinking about that distinction, who may have plans to come to the U.S. someday, may end up stuck in the process because they've got essentially the wrong vaccine. And
it's unclear to me. Let me just say, there was new rules that were announced yesterday. And I can tell you, it is contingent upon federal regulations or the WHO, the World Health Organization, as to whether they recognize the efficacy of those vaccines. So they have, like, literally yesterday, the Biden administration. Are you aware of this?
I know I'm not. I didn't know about this yesterday.
You should check the websites. Now, you should check the CDC, because yesterday, the U.S. Basically, they announced that it's going to lift the travel restrictions starting November 8th. They will reopen the U.S. to fully vaccinated international travelers who've been barred, obviously, as you know. There are stringent requirements, however. The vaccine needs to have been cleared by the World Health Organization or U.S. federal regulators. It sounds like the vaccines that are there have not been cleared by federal regulators. I don't know what the divergence is with the World Health Organization. So that will make a big difference. If unvaccinated children under the age of 18 will be permitted to enter the U.S., they will be. Children older than 2 who are traveling with fully vaccinated adult will need to show a negative coronavirus test within 3 days, though, of departure. So below 18, if you get a test and you're clean and you're with a vaccinated adult, then you'll be okay. There are some exemptions to the vaccination. If you're coming from a country where there's less than 10% of the overall population is fully vaccinated, and can show a compelling reason, you can come. That carve-out exists, obviously, because there are some countries that don't have access to the vaccinations, any of them. If you're just coming for tourism, that won't work. But if you're coming to see family, I suspect it would. So I would go and check that out. But it has been relentless, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, sure. Her final visa renewal interview isn't going to be in October, till October 2022, which is effectively 3 years later than she was hoping to get it. But thanks for sharing that info and hearing about the saga.
All right, appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Sounds difficult. I'm sorry for both of you guys. Wall and foot Tyler. Oh, what wall and floor Tyler? Sam, it's your favorite Australian. Anyway, I'm qualified wall and floor tiler, and I have many friends that are electricians. Please do not mess with the wiring of your home. I'm not messing with the wiring. I am literally just coming off of one light switch. That's it.
Sounds like you're messing with the wiring.
I'm not. I am. I've also done some wall and floor tiling.
I learned how to hang a light fixture from where a ceiling fan was on YouTube. And
super easy.
It is, but I felt very accomplished.
Yep. Calling from a 308 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 308. Oh, it disappeared. I don't know what happened there. All right. Let's take one more phone call before we go. Calling from a 571 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Dan. I am calling from California.
Dan from California. What's on your mind?
I was listening to the show yesterday, and there was a brief reference to Atlas Shrugged at one point.
Okay.
I think Emma said that she learned about, quote, Atlas Shrugged and all that bullshit, unquote.
Okay.
So that was interesting to me, and
what,
I was curious to...
What do you mean by interesting?
Well, I have a very different view of Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged myself, so
all right.
I wanted to see if we could discuss that a bit.
Sure.
And hear why she thinks that of it, or what you think of it.
Yes, bullshit. Dan, let me ask you a question. Did you and I talk last week?
Yes, I'm the one who called in about the chat policy.
About the chat policy. Everything's coming together now. Are you a libertarian, Dan?
No, I'm an objectivist.
What does that mean?
Well,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Objectivism is an entire philosophy. That's one thing. It's not just a political philosophy.
Also, it's a religion, too.
Well, I don't know.
Well, wait a second.
No, it's anti-religion.
Yeah, tell me what it is, not just what it isn't.
Okay. So, there's 5 branches of philosophy, and I could go through and just actually, Ayn Rand was actually asked, can you say what objectivism is while standing on one foot? And she did that once. There's an article called Introducing Objectivism, which you can find on the internet, and she does this. So I can give you the brief standing on one foot version. So in metaphysics, the view of what is the fundamental nature of reality like, she thinks there's just one world. There's no supernatural world. There's no God. It's just this world which we perceive with our senses and which we understand with our reason. And then second branch, epistemology, in other words, the study of the nature of knowledge. She's pro-reason, so she's anti-faith, which makes her anti-religion.
Okay.
She only believes in what you can prove by logic and reason and evidence of your senses. And then third branch, ethics. How should we live? She believes in a morality of rational self-interest, so you should do what's best for yourself.
Right.
I know that
while respecting the rights of others, neither sacrificing yourself to others nor others to yourself.
Right. Okay.
Fourth branch, the final branch.
Now that would you say that third branch, the one about pursuing your own self-interests, that one's when we start getting into politics a little bit, right?
Yeah. So she believes in individual rights. In her last branch, political philosophy, she believes in capitalism, and the way she understands that, I think it's often smeared today, but how she understands it is that you can't initiate force against other people. If you did that, you would be violating their rights. So you can do whatever you want as long as you don't use physical force against other people.
Right, the non-aggression policy, right?
How do you think, like,
well,
forests
that's
were
what libertarians
privatized?
sometimes call it. I think she didn't use that phrase. Sometimes it's called the non-initiation of force principle.
Fair enough.
But
Fair enough. Now, these are things that you subscribe to too, right? I mean, this isn't. I mean, she's just the person who came up with this stuff. You don't perceive her as some type of like demigod or anything.
Or like a deity, right? Since it's not religious in nature.
I mean, I admire her tremendously.
I mean, that
but
comes
I don't
across.
think she's like a supernatural being.
Okay, but I mean, in terms of like just non-supernatural beings, she's right up there, right? Like, I mean, she's almost supernatural.
She's like Plato, basically.
Right?
I think she was a heroic person, and she lived a very
Did it bum you out when
life.
you found out that she took Social Security?
No, actually, I recently produced a video about that, which I'm going to be releasing soon on my YouTube channel, which deals with the that smear of her that she was a hypocrite for taking money back that was looted from her through this program. And she actually discussed it herself in her article, The Question of Scholarships, which is available free on the internet. So there's no problem at all. It's perfectly consistent with her principles of non-coercion.
I see. Okay. She was just retrieving her property, as it were.
Exactly.
What about Medicare?
Well, she thinks that people should not be forced to pay for others people's
Actually, Medicare pays out more than it takes in. That's why I asked Medicare.
Well, it's premised on taxation. Everything that is funded by taxation is funded by a coercive means.
Right.
So if you want to voluntarily help pay for other people's health care, you are free to do that in a capitalist system.
Right.
What you are not free to do is to forcibly take others people's money and make them.
Don't believe in taxation. Don't believe in taxation.
Or coercion.
Right. If you understand that to mean coercion, then right, she's against it.
She's against tax. Well, taxation is necessarily coercive. You don't really get a choice. If you're going to be a member of the society.
Well, I've heard people define it in different ways. Some people think, some people talk about voluntary taxes, and you might not want to use the word.
There's no such thing as voluntary taxes.
You understand it in the
taxes are coercive. Period. Definitionally.
Okay, yeah, sure. If you want to define it that way, then yeah, she's against taxes.
Okay. All right. And let's just be clear here. You're not infertile. Because I sort of felt bad the other day. I was a little bit confused as to whether or not you could actually have children. But that's neither.
Yeah, I know that was. Yeah, I know that was a funny little bit that people have made a lot of hay of.
I know it. It was funny. I mean, actually, here, hold on, play the song for 1 second. Did you hear this? Because I want to get into. I want to get into the political aspects of your philosophy that guides your life. Because I'm not really that terribly interested in philosophies. But play this. This is actually pretty funny.
This video is aimed at anyone who wants to learn more about infertility.
I was wondering if you're open to talking about your chat room policy.
That is in the bylaws.
Yes, please tell me what my chat room policy is.
It's just saying silly comments.
YouTube chat.
So I block the people who are being rude and obnoxious to me.
All right, that's good. We should put a link to that song. It's pretty amazing.
It's called Dante's Infertile.
Yeah.
Kind of a good pun.
All right, but Dan, not Dante. Yes. Listen. I got to be honest with you. I'm not terribly interested in your philosophy, in philosophies, like how this deals with your life. Whether you believe in God or not believe in God or anything like that. That's all. None of that stuff really is implicated in the context of this show. But I'm more interested in what it means in terms of your politics. Now, you don't believe in taxes. You think taxes are immoral. And do you believe in and you believe that society can do better if everyone pursues their own self-interest? Is that one of the tenets of your philosophy or worldview? Okay.
Yeah,
now let me ask you this.
Okay.
What do you do about antibiotics? Would you take antibiotics? Because, if everybody takes antibiotics, which is, for anything, which as an individual makes a lot of sense because, if I have something that can be cleared up by antibiotics, I take it. If it doesn't clear it up, there's no really big harm in terms of the antibiotics, me taking them, as long as I take them as prescribed. However, when we get into the overuse of antibiotics, we are developing superorganisms or organisms that are mutating and making antibiotics less effective. So what do you do in that type of situation?
What do you do with antibiotics?
What do you do with the impetus to do what's in your rational self-interest when in fact you pursuing your rational self-interest actually has a detriment to society?
Well, if you can show that it does physical harm to other people, then you could...
Well, it doesn't do physical harm to other people. It makes antibiotics less effective if you just take them all the time, if you're not in any way circumspect in the way that you take them. But it is in your own individual self-interest to have antibiotics. I mean, I imagine you wouldn't even allow for like the licensing of people to prescribe drugs. I mean, why would the state do that?
Why? I mean, a licensing. I don't.
Don't get caught up in the licensing. I'm just saying that the reason why we inhibit the use of antibiotics is not because it's not in the interest of any given individual at any given instance to take antibiotics. It's because we're afraid of antibiotics becoming ineffective.
Wait, so you're saying that if people take antibiotics,
if there's too much use of antibiotics, there is a great fear within the medical community, and there's a lot of indications that the overusage of antibiotics, on the whole, the collective overuse of antibiotics is making them less effective long term. And yet, as an individual, it makes sense for me to defer to antibiotics because there's no detriment to me as an individual to take these antibiotics.
Okay. So you're saying there's a conflict between what's good for the individual,
correct,
and what's good for the society.
Yeah.
I mean, there are kinds of examples like that you could raise, and it's not always obvious.
Right? I mean, it's pretty obvious.
This one's obvious.
This one's super obvious. That's why I brought it up. It's super obvious.
So you think assuming this effect is real, the solution that's obvious is what?
Well, the point is that it sort of puts it illustrates that what might be good in the rational self-interest of the individual is not good in the interest of the collective and of society. And I wonder how someone like you deals with that reality.
Well, one thing I'm saying here is it's not always obvious what the solution is. Like, I don't know what I would do personally about this if I were.
How does that square with your philosophy?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. This is something I would have to think about. I mean, you're talking about a medical situation. It's got these.
Well, I'm talking about the concept of. I mean, there's a lot of examples, frankly, where we can talk about what's good for the individual isn't necessarily good for society. You know, one of those things actually came up in the Republican presidential primary last round, 2015. It was in the rational self-interest of all of those candidates to not attack Donald Trump early on because they didn't want to alienate Donald Trump's sizable support. However, they ended up all losing, and arguably the Republican Party ended up losing on some level, and certainly I think society did. Maybe you disagree, because they acted in their own rational self-interest. What I'm trying to do is to give you, illustrations and examples of when your philosophy, and I know it's rather rigid, is wrong.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you can come up with a clear example,
I feel like I just gave you two.
Well, here's a question. Do you go to work?
I do.
Do you have a steady job?
Yes.
What happens if you don't go to work?
Then I will not get paid.
Right. And you need to be paid to exist in society. Is that correct?
Well, unless I file for some government program like a welfare that coerces people to support myself.
Can we just historicize that for a moment?
Wait, where are you going?
Right, but you are coerced to go to work, are you not, to continue to exist in society?
No, I choose to go to work.
But you choose to go to work, but you can't exist in society without going to work. How is that a choice?
I could exist in society without going for work. It might not be very good. I could live as a bum on the street and try to panhandle for money, and some people do that.
And a lot of them die.
And a lot of them, yeah, it's not a great way to live. I wouldn't choose it for myself.
You also could not pay taxes. You also could not pay taxes, as you say. You could be a conscientious non-taxpayer and go to prison and still live. Or you could live as a bum, as you'd say, on the street. So there are narrow exceptions to these coercive concepts that you're talking about. It's just which coercion makes sense for society, because you already are being coerced into a job.
No, I don't accept that.
Okay, caller, can I try? Caller, do you know what the word enclosure means?
I've heard of that. I had a debate with a communist on YouTube, and he talked about enclosures in England, and I said I didn't know much about that, but...
It's not just in England. I mean, it's anywhere that you take land that was commonly held by the community and make it private property, a process that started basically like 400 years ago. Prior to that, you could just go into the woods and, you know, be self-sufficient or be among your community. But in this epoch we live now, what Emma said is true. So you can't just like opt out of this situation. It is a fundamental coercion, since basically we've privatized every way to live on your own self-sufficiently.
You think well, first of all, not everything is. Have
you tried hunting in America?
A ton of government. There's a ton of land that's owned by the governments.
And capitalists are going after it over and over again in America, and a lot less in Europe, right? So like but do you think that land should be held in common, or do you think that should be private property?
In general, maybe there are some exceptions, like government land for government buildings, but the vast majority, at least, I think, should be private.
Right. So then it's owned. So, like, for instance, if you wanted to go hunt for food, you would have to ask the landowner for permission.
Yeah. If you're hunting on somebody's land, then yeah, I would think you need permission to hunt or do anything else on their land.
So the self-sufficiency goes out the window unless you're basically on good with the local landowner.
I mean, you can rent from somebody. I don't know. So are you thinking self-sufficient?
Well, no, I think the point is he's saying, like, you know, you have this option of becoming a bum. But I mean, if we lived in the world that you wanted to live, there would be no place where you were allowed to live as what you call a bum. Right? Like, I mean, in your worldview, there are no public streets. There are no public sidewalks. There's only we'll make allowances for governmental buildings. But how do you, in your worldview, where it's not coercive for you to have a job, how do you exist? Because you walk on that private property, dude, and you don't have a place to live or to be. I'm going to say get out.
I don't think it's that hard to support yourself. You work a job. You pay some.
Well, no. We're not talking about hard. We're not talking about hard. We're talking about because you're talking about a philosophy, right? Like, I mean, this is why I don't subscribe to some type of, like, you know, principles that I have to, that provide answers for me in every situation, like ostensibly objectivism does. But you do. And your philosophy is that, I mean, you just said dictates to you that having to work is not coercive in any way. And we said, well, how is that the case? If you want to live in society, you need to work. And he's like, no, I could choose to live as a bum, you said, and hang out. And I'm suggesting to you that if the other part of your philosophy, which was that we should only have private property, short of maybe a government owning a place for their building, my question to you would be, like, whose private property are you going to be able to trespass upon in your life as a guy who doesn't make money in this society? Like, where are you going to sleep at night, dude?
Well, I mean, you're putting yourself in that problem.
No. You're putting yourself in that property. You're that problem. You're saying that there is an option to not working and to not getting government largesse. And what is that option in which you can survive?
You choose to work, so you don't.
No. Listen.
But if you're
avoiding the question. I'm saying it's a choice. It's a free choice, right? So there must be an option.
Yeah.
What's the option to not working in this society, in particularly the society that you envision, where everything is owned privately? You tell me what you, Dan, fertile or not, is going to do. You have made the choice to not work, to not earn any money in society. You've also, because of your philosophy, said that the government should not be providing any help to you, Dan.
So Dan, you have this free choice. What's the choice? Talk to me about the choice that you choose not to work. What happens then?
Well, assuming I make that bad choice, I don't know why I would do that, but if I make that choice...
Well, because you can, because of freedom.
You're not being coerced.
Freedom, right?
Yeah, if I stupidly make the choice not to work, stupidly make the choice not to work, then I would have to rely on charity.
Wait. No, let's talk about the day you get knocked out of your apartment, right? You can't pay your rent on your apartment. Where do you go?
I don't know. Maybe I go to a park or something.
Whoa. A public park? Dude, wait. Dude, we're living in Dan's world. There are no public parks.
Yeah, maybe in Dan's world, we would create a park for people exactly in the kind of situation.
Who's we? Wait. We?
Yeah. Maybe some...
We?
Anybody,
what do you mean,
anybody.
we?
Say you're some capitalist businessman, and you don't want to have dead or sick poor people just going at random places, so you create...
No, wait, who's done that? Who's ever done that? Well, we're not going to do that. You can't rely on somebody's largesse.
We have homeless people now.
I want to know. Yeah, exactly. Wait, what do you mean, we? Dan, what do you do? You've been kicked out of your apartment. Where do you go?
Look, if I were running the show...
No, Dan, you're not running the show. You simply made the free choice. You can say it's smart or not smart. Well, that's debatable, but you made the free choice to not work because work is not coercive in our society, according to you. You don't need money. You can choose to do something else. You've been kicked out of your apartment because your landlord has said you haven't paid rent. Where do you go? You step out that door. Where do you go?
You're saying every inch of the earth is owned by someone.
You just said to me, Dan, you don't believe in public property. You believe that it should be privatized. So where do you go?
All right, let me see if I can think this through. So I'm kicked out of my apartment, and I guess any other street I walk on, I hear the music.
Yep. It's like the game show. You're thinking you get time to think, choose door number 1, door number 2 type of thing. I'm just trying to fill time.
Yeah, I mean, so much would be different. There would be so much different in this world that I don't know what all the options would be. I would assume that the free market would have evolved a mechanism by this time to handle the kind of,
well, that's a hell of an assumption.
Well, wait a second. I'm just curious what that evolution would look like. The free market would be like incinerator. Like maybe we get if you can't pay your rent and you got to step out, we're not going to allow you to step on. You're not walking on my sidewalk.
Into the fire pit.
Historically,
that's the cheapest way to do it.
The solution is penal colony.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I would put you in a labor camp, like a privatized one, of course, or maybe the incinerator. Maybe I get a contract from somebody from the government, but there's that nasty government again. I guess the point is that I'm trying to make here, and the reason why you can't come up with this answer is either the need for money is coercive in our society, or the world in which you envision is not real or possible. You are imagining
about this really weird case. I'm curious. It's not going to be.
It's just the one that just happened. It was just literally the one that just sort of we walked into because we could have had this conversation about, and it could have been 20 other examples.
Because you said work isn't coercive, and you're saying taxes are coercive, but work is not. That's why we're in this hypothetical right now.
Well, let me ask you about this. If you're alone on an island, you have to work to survive, right?
What?
If you're alone on an island, do you have to work to survive?
Do I have to work to survive? I would.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if I'm alone on the island, guess what? I brought also a bunch of food and a bunch of other stuff, too.
How about if there's 2 people on the island? Does one own it and the other works for the person? Like.
No. Hold on. You're getting ahead of.
Okay, sorry.
You're alone on the island.
Yeah.
Do you have to work to survive?
I would imagine.
Yeah, I probably have to do some fishing, maybe build some shelter.
Are you being coerced?
No.
Okay, so just because you have to work to survive doesn't mean you're being coerced.
Well, I don't have to earn any money.
Yeah, exactly. You're not making any money. You're not earning a wage from a capitalist.
I don't earn any money. And also, you know what doesn't exist on that island?
Property.
Private property.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody owns that island.
Nobody has
It's all public property.
Now, if it's all private property and I don't have money, I'd probably die.
Money is irrelevant on the island.
Oh, well, so isn't property. Okay, I'll tell you what, dude. If you eliminate private property, I will have no issue with people working to survive.
Yeah, work is good. Work for capitalists, especially when it's compelled by the state powers, is not. It's a different thing.
So if you're alone on the island and you have to work to survive, you're not going to be as well off as if there were someone there who could be your employer and offer you a job. Who's already got a system that's established.
What?
And you can just easily walk into that and earn a wage.
Wait a second. I'm alone on the island, but there's a boss there?
Who's going to determine my wage?
Your life would be much easier if there were an employer to help you out.
You know what would be even more...
Wait a second.
That's such coke energy,
so
dude.
If I'm alone... Wait. You're saying my life on the island would be easier if I was working for an employer on the island alone.
How much do you love your boss, Dan?
Can we just talk about Robinson Crusoe for a second? Like, if there was another person on the island, okay, I don't buy that it would be more helpful if he was a boss. But if he was willing to work for you for no wage, that would be ultra helpful, actually, and maybe more historically accurate.
But he wouldn't be a boss.
A random boss just there to tell you what to do and how much you get for how much work you did? That would not be helpful. A boss that just... Is it the idea that the boss just knows productivity so well that he can teach you exactly the way to build the hut and fish for fish? Like, that's just the divine power of bosses?
No, I'm saying that employers are helping you survive. They're not making your life worse. So they're not...
That's not true. What do they do with a political system?
That is an interesting take. But you know what, Dan? We have spent a lot of time on this, and I cannot tell you.
I appreciate it.
Call back in about A equals A. I want to talk to you about A equals A, maybe on a Thursday.
Yes.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right.
And Dan, your boss
and I am really
appreciates your loyalty.
Sorry about your inability to have children.
If only...
Wait, did I get that right?
No, it's the other way around.
Okay, no. Right. You are fertile.
Do we have his theme song, though? Maybe just to play him out?
I love the idea of a deserted island, but there's an employer.
It is, of course.
I'm alone on this island, except there's a job creator.
The harrowing story of Employer Island.
Robinson Crusoe, LLC.
Dan's a good sport.
Yeah,
Dan's a good sport.
That's the plot to Castaway, right?
You know, Dan sounds older than I think. I mean, is he? I forgot to ask how old Dan was. He sounds older.
That's so funny.
Sounds older than I would imagine he must be.
Well, we should say, though, Dan, as Ayn Rand fans go, you weren't, you're at the top of the heap. Yeah.
I love the libertarians who are not libertarians.
Objectivist.
I know. Yeah, that's good.
It's an even more myopic perspective on the world, which is somehow possible.
Penny from New Mexico says, I can't believe you're still wasting time with this guy. I'd much prefer hearing other more thoughtful and important conversations from the MR audience. I've actually turned off the show for long stretches and come back to find you still talking to him. I know I can't. But you missed the part about the deserted island, except for the boss. That's that would have been a twist in Lost, right? Like that.
Yes, right. That's what they find when they find the bunker,
show. Right?
What is this? Is this a job opening? I didn't know there was any civilization on this island.
Oh my god!
I can get in on the ground floor in the mailroom.
Hey, folks, you know what the real problem is with our world today? It is, of course, that our world has gotten refeminized. For a long time, we were fortunately free of feminized femininity. And of course, now it's come roaring back.
Sam's talking about before I joined the show.
That's right.
Yeah.
This is a perfect example.
I know.
Tucker's on it with the Claremont Institute's Arthur, what is it, Millick? Yeah. Here he is.
The other, just to finish this other point, the other end goal of this kind of refeminized world requires that the whole world, literally the whole world, be feminized. In other words, you can't just have America where there's androgyny, because then you have violent enemies still who are male and aggressive.
For a second? You can pause something for a second? If the whole world's feminized, is there androgyny? Am I misunderstanding these terms?
I guess the feminized males would be the androgynous population.
I see. Is that what happens?
It's the highfalutin way to say soy boy.
This was the grand plan of David Bowie's, Reich of androgyny.
I know, and like Harry Styles is wearing a dress, so proves
Billy
my
Porter?
point. Yeah.
Okay. Androgyny. All right. I thought it was both, you're masculine and feminine, but I guess like you can't get fully feminized if you're masculine. You only get, it brings you to androgyny. Okay. All right. So
he saw Wonder Woman and thought Themyscira.
So it's not a full-on feminization. It's really androgenization. But okay, continue.
Yeah, okay.
In other words, you can't just have America where there's androgyny, because then you have violent enemies still who are male and aggressive. China, for example, who is not doing this.
No, just the opposite.
Just the opposite, exactly. So it's this kind of utopian thinking because the whole world somehow simultaneously must renounce this element of our nature. And of course, it's a hopeless project, but nonetheless, it does enormous harm for us. One easy example of that is, part of the reason, besides the cynical motives, but part of the reason why we have so much illegal immigration in this country, to the extent that no other country allows, it's unbelievable. Well, the reason is because there's this prejudice in us that the world can somehow be peaceful through the unification of human beings, that nations don't matter, that therefore friend and enemy distinctions don't matter. And that comes from this female hope of making the world a safe place without any violence. And you can do a great deal of damage by getting spun up on that hope, like what we're doing now.
Whoa, yeah.
I want to get back to those are all provocative thoughts, and I think they're likely all 100% true.
100%, 100%.
You read these.
That's true. First off, Emma, if I had the opportunity to just pet you on the head, just sort of tap you on the head right now.
Please don't.
Slow your roll on thinking that we can all get along and this and that. Your wonderful icon who you praise all the time, who was such a peacenik, Margaret Thatcher, and how much you loved how sort of like docile she was.
Yeah.
How, like she was thought about how like we needed to bring all peoples together and this and that. Oh, Emma, you're so naive. But it's not your fault because you're a woman.
I'm a woman. And you know what that means, though, is that all aggression and war and violence, that's natural. That's the natural way to be.
That's natural for us guys.
Yeah, exactly.
But you silly ladies with your thoughts that maybe we wouldn't have to have. And you see what's happening. Like the Chinese are becoming like ultra masculine. And we're becoming incredibly feminized. I mean, the Chinese eat virtually no soy. Is that
Yeah, right.
Do I have that right? They're like, I mean, it's a little bit of soy. Just a little bit of soy. Just in their sauce. Is that right? Do I have that right? And then, of course, they're becoming more masculine. And therefore, they're going to take over the world. Because we're going to be sitting here, like, oh,
remember the missile?
Oh, what's the pronoun?
We're all sissified. I darn it. We shouldn't have allowed ourselves to get sissified.
We were talking about
becoming
internationalism and world peace, and then we were distracted from the non-soy eating Chinese who understand their gender roles. It's all connected.
The missile gap, except for testosterone, apparently.
Well, I mean, the missile gap, I mean... Talk about feminized, you get less missiles, if you know what I mean.
We need an arms race, but for tea.
We need more phallic explosive devices.
I mean,
yes. Not seeing enough missiles being shot into the air to show our dominance and our potency.
The billionaires can't do it themselves.
We should say that was, Tucker's a daytime show where he apparently searches actively for guests who are expressing ideas that were developed in junior high and then frozen in amber until the person gets big enough to fit into a grown-up size suit.
I'm surprised.
And then they
Crowder
bring them on the
hasn't
show.
been on.
Yeah. And talk about, I mean, this feminized stuff, like I've talked about this in the past, like this is stuff that Rush Limbaugh has been going on, God bless his soul, he's left us now, for decades. And I remember being on Air America back in like 2005 and getting calls from people because Limbaugh was talking about Dick Durbin wearing a pink tie. And then it was like all our Muslim enemies are laughing at us and how feminized we've become. But now it's the Chinese who are doing the opposite. They're just getting more and more masculine. We're getting feminized, and we're just sitting ducks as we sit around here, kumbaya, doing dances around a maypole with our flowers in our hair, thinking that we can all just be, friends, and the Chinese are sitting over there applauding on how they're going to take over the world.
Yeah, this Millick from the Claremont Institute, also where John Eastman, who recently in the news for wanting to throw out votes of 81 million people. So Claremont sending their best for the Republicans.
Of course.
They definitely are.
Of course.
Yeah, that's just our militarism is an extension of their own masculine insecurity. It makes sense.
It's so funny, like J.D. Vance did this, like Milley's making the army a whole bunch of cucks or whatever type of take, and people act as like that's like criticism of the military. Like that, this is what happens when you throw in with the sort of right wing in terms of like anti-imperialism, is that we're not masculine enough to fight China.
And this is also a good example of like, what Corey Robin wrote about, like with the reactionary mind, right? Like he's presenting this new idea, this new sort of edgy idea that there's too much womenness in us now, and we have to fight that.
Also, like, I mean, a cuck army or like a feminized or / androgynous army, that I mean, not to be too nerdy, but that's like a concept of the Unsullied in Game of Thrones. They they got rid of all of their other desires, and they castrated them so they would be obedient soldiers and slaves.
Yeah,
so,
but
I mean, maybe the women are onto something.
But castration is not the same as feminization, right? I mean, because castration is like, so you don't doodle yourself, I guess, and get distracted.
Yes.
If you're feminized, then you would just sort of like probably you would still doodle, but it would be like what you were contemplating would be different. And then that's
like
what makes
fairies and hearts and makeup and stuff like that.
Exactly. And that's the problem there is. And
well, he said androgynous, so I wasn't exactly clear.
Well, that's true. Right. And it's also it's not just about whether we can physically fight. It's the mentality, because this is the thing you don't understand, Emma. And it would be hard for you to, it would be for me to expect you to understand.
Yeah, pat me on the head virtually.
Yeah, no, I mean, women just like have these like sort of like delusions that we can all just get along, but men understand the cold hard facts.
Where you can draw people into strict lines of friend and enemy.
Yeah, exactly. And men understand these things in a way that like I mean, read up a little bit, but I
couldn't actually ever conceptualize it because of my chromosomes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let me just say,
it's all in hand.
We got this. Okay. Yeah. We got it.
Wait, but can I add something? But
okay.
I understand. I don't have anything to add, actually.
You know what? That was very good. I was so impressed by that.
This is how we're fighting the feminization of America.
There we go.
I'm going to go into the kitchen. Do you guys want me?
Yeah. Would you mind getting a coffee?
Everyone good on coffee?
That would be great. That would be great.
Okay.
He's a hard-boiled egg.
Yeah, that would be terrific. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I'm actually going to get more water. Be right back. Hold on, just reading I am or something. I'm just
okay.
I'm really thirsty.
Hey, Bradley, this would be a good time for you to get a glass of water for Emma, maybe. What do you think? I mean, let's go. Come on. Oh, my God. So...
Sorry, I didn't want to re-feminize.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. That's right. Solo joking. A concept art for Emma Jardy report uploaded to YouTube. I'm not trying to promote a YouTube channel. You can show it without my info, or I can resend with a private link to post. We will check it out. Deontological consequentialist. Sam, I rewatched your second debate with Walter Block a little ago, and he said he's for vaccine mandates. I wonder now that he's a Trump guy if that's changed.
That's a good question.
You should do a where are they now for your libertarian foes. That's a good idea. Sink Mansion's yacht up the RA, left his best. I have a job to buy a PlayStation games. This objectivist seems like a plant. We get you compartmentalize others' suffering so you can feel better about capitalism. Femboys unite. Tongue in cheek. Is it a violation of the non-aggression principle to be unvaccinated?
To be a, I would say so. I think it's pretty aggressive to put other people's health in danger because you don't want to get a vaccine.
Yeah. Oliver Wendell Homeslice. Perhaps I'm being naive, but don't political parties sometimes have to tell their donors, I'm sorry, this issue is pulling at 80%. You're going to have to take an L on this one? Remind Big Pharma that this is still a corporatist country and they'll still make plenty of money and then draw a line in the sand. Conversely, have Schumer remind his senators like Sinema that it's not like Pharma can't just decide to stop donating to Democrats out of spite. They know they can't abandon either party entirely or face retribution down the line, so call their bluff. Also, just slip her a bag of cash or something. I mean, I am of the mind, this will not surprise you, that they have no way of moving Sinema or Manchin, for that matter, in any significant way.
Yeah.
That the mistakes that Biden and Schumer made happened 6 months ago. And we were saying at the time, like, they should take this momentum from the COVID relief package. And the idea is not like this, like momentum in this sense is not like an ephemeral, quality. It's real. It's real. It's not a feeling. It is that things had aligned in such a way that the Republicans were still talking about Dr. Seuss, that there was no pivot point for anybody to sort of like, what's in this bill? What's going to be bad about it? How do I allay the forces? And I'm talking about Manchin and Sinema, and I'm talking about probably other corporate Democrats in there too. How do I get with the opponents of these bills? It's not like, people materialize in a moment. You have to organize, and they organize. They can do it quicker. There's smaller numbers. They have more money. They know who their allies and enemies are. But I mean, that's why you got to move quick. There's a big difference between 6 or 7 months. There's a big difference between coalescing Republicans and inviting them into the White House so that they can debate and figure out like what, where there are points of agreement as to what we should oppose and how we should go about doing it and this and that. And the Democratic leadership blew it. There is no, it's quite clear now that there is no negotiating with these people. They're going to get their demands, period, end of story. The leverage is gone. The leverage is gone. There was a situation, and in many respects, it's like, and I'm sorry to use a football metaphor when Emma's away. It is, I keep repeating this. They were on the field. It was a hurry-up offense because the only way you're going to score is if the defense is not organized. And there's still 2 players on the sideline, and the coach hasn't figured out, wait a second, is this going to be a run play or a pass play? Like, who do I put in? That's the only opportunity, particularly with a 50-50 Senate, that Democrats had. And it was not such an obscure idea that we couldn't see it from here. Let's put it that way.
And as soon as Joe Biden said, I'm going to open this up to Republicans because of their fealty to this notion of bipartisanship, no, steamroll. When you have the opportunity, you steamroll. You do not hesitate. You just do. And they didn't. And it's done. There's not enough of there's nobody who has a bag big enough of cash that it can't be matched by somebody on the other side. Trans warfare. You mentioned the halt of Sudanese aid. What's your take on the status of the Sugandis? I don't know what that means. Sorry. The Tim Caucus. You should sell MR mechanical pencils. That's what I use for my pyrography. Getting an objectivist on Peacock Separation Day. Nerd Cheetah. I must have missed something additional bitching about how the bitching about establishment Dems is disempowering because I caught another clip where there was more bitching. Instead of philosophizing and trying to reach Michael-style historical and cross-cultural references to connect to, or scratching heads in exasperation and bewilderment, take the first step. Admit that you have a bitching problem. Then take the next step. Join the other bitchers who realized long ago that the simplest explanation of Dem perpetual failures when, oh my God. When it comes to the vote for them, can be explained simply, they're rewarded for that failure.
Enough,
This is
Jimmy.
the dumbest. This is so, you're so dumb. Honestly, this is so dumb of you. It's not, first off, it's not happening. What you're selling is nihilism. Honestly, so stupid.
So stupid.
I'd like to know what they are doing proactively, though. Other than just like having that understanding.
Well, that's the point. You cannot. You can't. You like. What did your vote do? You vote for Jill Stein. What did that do?
Fought the duopoly, man.
No, but it didn't.
The frickin' duopoly.
It's just as futile as anything else. I mean, look. The bottom line is, child tax credits for 1 year is better than child tax credits for no years. That's just the bottom line. You weren't going to get that. I mean, just starting with these. Oh, trench warfare. Sug on D's nuts. Okay, gotcha. All right. Tim from Boston, the Ticketmaster page for the live show said there's a passcode to purchase tickets, but it does not accept MR as the code. Bradley, will you look into that? Quick, because that might hurt ticket sales. Insufferable pendant. Oh, housekeeping. All right. Leninade 562, Union Steward and Locksmith here. The piece Emma and Matt played yesterday about the guy calling C-SPAN is exactly why all workers should have unions. The work this guy was talking about, we don't want to learn, is office etiquette and how to use Excel. I'm too busy and tired to have to waste my time with paperwork. I have doors to fix and keys to cut. Left is best. Bourbon Socialist. Will all the interviews you did with the Peacock still be available on the app? If I can't listen to them anymore, that app is going to go straight in the trash. Yes. Well, they only keep the last 30 days of the Peacock interviews, although I wonder if they're going to recycle them. I don't know. But there may be other ways to listen in the future for members. Different things. Tucker, wow, that was so provocative and brilliant. Incomprehensible anxiety about girly men. Tucker, wow, that was so provocative and brilliant. It's always sunny and snowy in Ottawa. That call with the infertile libertarian was a masterpiece in QA testing a system and breaking it. If his philosophy was a video game, you got it to crash super hard, like loading too many NPCs into Skyrim hard. It's my birthday. Can I get a shofar? You can. Speaking of dumb people. So apparently the demi-jors of the world are mad at Noam Chomsky because he's in favor of vaccine mandates. The if you did not realize that these dumb lefts, as we called them, and really we were just being we were being nice by giving them the moniker left.
Could have said like about Jimmy crypto reactionaries.
Right. Yeah. I think we could just say dum-dums now, right? Yeah. It's a specific category of dum-dums.
Dum-dums appealing to a certain anti-elitist right wing.
A new audience.
Right. It's an anti-establishment.
Anti-establishment.
Contrarian. And these guys, we put up that graphic the other day of all the anti-vax stuff that Demi Jor has been doing. And this one is pretty good. They're really mad at Chomsky, apparently, because Chomsky's for vaccine mandates. And I think he also called like the force the vote like childish.
Yeah. So they were already primed to.
So there's a lot of anger there. Yeah. There's a lot of anger there.
First the pet project, and now the larger anti-vax grift for the new audience. So you get a twofer to hate on Chomsky.
So apparently Chomsky's on some podcast. He does all sorts of different podcasts. I think he's nearing the end, and
perhaps too generous with his time.
He might be, but I genuinely appreciate that he's doing this.
Yes.
And I think it's important, and I think it's good for him that he's going on to all these things, and I think it shows sort of his integrity, frankly. Mm-hmm. And apparently Jimmy didn't like this answer about vaccines. Here it is.
So watch how he gets this wrong. We're talking about the global south not wanting the vaccines, and watch what he has to say.
On the left have been concerned that vaccines are not getting to many third world countries. However, I believe that there also is a great deal of skepticism among those populations where they're saying that they don't want it, especially in Africa. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on there. Why do you think that there is so much?
Pause it for 1 second. For folks who are just listening,
a headline
that he puts up the headline. No, keep the image up, please. Keep the image up. He's put up the headline.
That's not happened yet.
It's right here. Like, what is driving COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy in sub-Saharan Africa? And then just go a little bit farther, because here comes the next headline that Jimmy isolates. Remember, Jimmy does tweets. No, back.
No,
right there. Stop. What is driving COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy in sub-Saharan Africa? Right, there it is. And this is from the World Bank blog.
Despicable.
Jimmy must read quite a bit, I guess.
He's a voracious reader.
He's a voracious reader of headlines and tweets. But if you start getting into like multiple numbers of words, then things sort of break down for him. But let's listen to what he's got to say about this article that he's basing this whole critique of Noam Chomsky on. Here we go. Yeah, go back from the beginning.
So watch how he gets this wrong. We're talking about the global south not wanting the vaccines, and watch what he has to say.
On the left have been concerned that vaccines are not getting to many third world countries. However, I believe that there also is a great deal of skepticism among those populations where they're saying that they don't want it, especially in Africa. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on there. Why do you think that there is so much vaccine hesitancy in the global south?
Global south, there is overwhelming demand for vaccines. Overwhelming. They are pleading for the West to stop hoarding the vaccines and to let them have them so that they can overcome the terrible effect of non-vaccination. That is the overwhelming majority.
Last.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's his response, which is, I'm going to say wrong. And why do I say it? Well, here's a headline that says, what is driving the COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy in sub-Saharan Africa, which goes against what he just said.
Okay.
He said there isn't hesitancy.
This is such an example of total stupidity. A, that headline does not refute the Noam Chomsky saying there is overwhelming desire and demand for vaccines in the global south. Incidentally, the global south is bigger than sub-Saharan Africa, 1. 2, the fact that there is overwhelming demand for vaccines in the global south or even in sub-Saharan Africa does not negate the existence of vaccine hesitancy. What's driving vaccine hesitancy does not say that vaccine hesitancy is the reason why people are unvaccinated largely. Like, this is just
despicable.
This is just like reading comprehension literally for third graders. Okay, third grade level.
Well, that
reading
assumes
comprehension.
he did the reading.
No, I'm talking about the headline.
Yeah.
Then let's go into the article, which he clearly did not read.
It took Sam like 2 seconds. We looked this up before the show. Yeah.
So dumb, this man is so stupid. But understand, all he gives a shit about is getting the clicks from his new audience, which is vaccine, anti-vax, and has decided that because Chomsky is for vaccine mandates, is now anti-Chomsky. As African countries accelerate the deployment of COVID-19 vaccines, the issue of vaccine hesitancy looms. Globally, there has been a rise in general vaccine hesitancy, but especially towards COVID-19 vaccines.
Globally.
In Africa, hesitancy must be viewed in the context of significant vaccine shortage. In other words, there's significant vaccine shortage, and you must understand that to the extent that there's hesitancy, it is within the context that there's a big shortage.
This is the third sentence.
It exists, but it does not driving the issue. Hesitancy does not explain fully the low vaccination rates in Africa. The slow vaccine rollout on the continent is due to supply constraints, structural issues, and logistical barriers. In other words, now understand, this is the World Bank, whose interest in maintaining patents and in maintaining the practices to develop and produce vaccines does not lie with the Global South. The critical question is how to increase both supply and demand. And then they go on to say that the 2020 Africa Center for Disease Control, 2020.
Yeah.
This is pre-development of vaccine. Survey in 15 countries found that while 79% of respondents would take a COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy ranged from 4 to 38%.
Which is largely indistinguishable from vaccine hesitancy in the United States.
As it exists today, when billions of people have been vaccinated, and that number is going to be lower. In 2020, vaccine hesitancy was higher than 38% in this country. I mean, so this is just like, he's just stupid, but doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
He doesn't give a shit about any of it.
He's covering for the actual vaccine apartheid that pharmaceutical companies are
That's
actually
the point.
pursuing.
Well, let's continue. Here he comes. Because we have done multiple interviews. You can go back and look at it. We've done it on the other Peacock show as well. Bill Gates stepped in between the UN and essentially the world in their attempting very early on to share all information about the development of vaccines.
The intellectual property.
The intellectual property and the best practices on how to produce them so that the production facilities could be replicated around the world.
And they may trust them better if they're more local, perhaps.
And Gates stepped in with COVAX, and basically with the money and the relationships he had through the Gates Foundation, pushed this initiative about COVAX that said, we're going to give away 25% of whatever it is, the needs for vaccines. They never hit those goals at all.
Yeah.
And but
make it
here
voluntary. And by the way, buttressed by the big pharma that Jimmy Dore and other types are saying is the one that's like behind this mass authoritarian effort. So who's serving big pharma here by claiming that the global south does not want vaccines?
Maybe Bill Gates is doing the global south a favor by not letting them
by letting them die.
Yeah.
By letting them die. And who is aiding and abetting the elites and the shadowy figures behind the scenes like Bill Gates and big pharma by literally handing on a platter their talking point about, it's the global vaccine hesitancy. We'll continue to hoard these vaccines in the West. Thank you, Jimmy, for backing up Big Pharma. We really appreciate it.
Maybe Bill Gates found out what was going on with VAERS, and now he's very concerned for the global South.
Yeah, play this clip. Keep going.
But there is. We know there is. Here's also who wants COVID-19 vaccination in 5 West African countries. Hesitancy is high and trust is low. They're not making it available, Chomsky. Why do you think they're not making it available for free to everybody if it's what you say? Why wouldn't Bill Gates and all the big vaccine people make this vaccine available? I mean, right now, Moderna and Pfizer, they're making tens of billions of dollars. They can provide this vaccine to everybody. Why aren't they doing it? Noam, what is going on? Why did Bill Gates tell Oxford to not give away their patent for their why is all this happening? Chomsky doesn't seem to have a critique of fucking anything except repeat shitlib talking points.
Well, very few people in the what would pass for the left now have a critique of this anymore. It's strange.
We've done multiple segments on that very, very topic.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
There's been the number of articles critiquing the fact that they've been hoarding the vaccine, the idea that we're going on to booster shots and not providing these vaccines for around the globe. I can't even tell what Dore is saying. It's just a bunch of fucking gibberish about how they're so vaccine hesitant. Why won't the Gates Foundation? I mean, is Chomsky saying that he's in favor of withholding patents in the development of these vaccines? I don't understand. They're so mad that he is in favor of vaccine mandates, and they're so captured by an audience that is giving them clicks, that wants them to be critical of anything that pushes vaccines. It is like brain rot, and just combined with just utter stupidity.
Well,
Jimmy Dore has always been fundamentally someone who has. If I can somehow stretch this headline, I'll do it.
Well, don't read it. He didn't read, and I've talked about this all the time. He didn't read at all at TYT either, and he's continuing it to this day, except just with a new, this is authoritarian for my grip.
But they don't need to read because they have the message that they want, which is that a branding one, which is that the other left is lazy and too lazy to stand up to this authoritarianism. That's really the message. They don't really give a shit about African hesitancy.
I can't comprehend the stupidity of saying that that he is opposing Bill Gates in this instance by claiming that the global South as a monolith does not want vaccines. That's literally the exact project that you were pretending to be railing against right there. He is the one denying vaccines to the global South as well as the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah. Bradley, can you put up that the social blade metrics that I put up so we can maybe see some material reasons for why this pivot? If you look at what happened to him after the election, that's so those low ones there about May 21st, that's about 2,000. The mid-range is about 20,000. So his subscribers just completely fell off until the last few months when you see a nice little boost.
You know what that bump is right there? That bump is going after the squad.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that bump right there.
But to be fair, he was doing that when it was killing his ratings in January and February too with forced to vote stuff.
Right. That's what that was.
No, but if you look at that graph, he's tanking when he starts attacking squad. Or is that what you're saying?
No.
No, look, it's going down when he's doing the whole forced to vote.
Put it back
up. And then it basically flatlines this summer and then goes back up once he starts doing the anti-vax stuff.
Oh, it starts to go back up as he goes. Yes, I understand. Well, at one point, people lose interest in him saying the same thing over again. There's only 9 months you can flog.
Well, after Biden wins the election, it doesn't lose it because he didn't listen to make Tulsi Gabbard vice president. What are you going to listen to?
Right. I see. This is August right there.
Yeah.
Oh.
Interesting, huh?
That's all vaccine, man.
All vaccine
shit. Yes.
He was up at India Walton's campaign, I think in Buffalo, and said
they're keeping people out. They're checking IDs and vax cards. And somebody with "End the Fed" 18 says apartheid, a mad face emoji. That's the audience he's cultivating. Jimmy did not mention that there was a fast test booth for folks who were not vaccinated because
unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean he's a charlatan milking anti-vaxxers.
Jersey Max, I think it's funny. I have a coworker who sits 15 feet from me and watches Demi Jor while I'm watching you. My coworker's anti-vax mandate. There you go. And also a bit of a coin nerd. The best part is he saw over my shoulder that I was watching MR, and it was the episode with Andrew Callahan. Told me that you were very dishonest in the primaries, especially regarding Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang, has he even gotten an update on Andrew Yang?
Oh, he's doing the Forward Party. There was news today. He's doing a bunch of rallies for his,
his Forward Party. But wasn't there also something
meme
that
party?
He was? I mean, talk about dishonest. Andrew Yang claimed that he was going to win in the Democratic primary, and then after he had convinced Democratic voters to vote for him as a Democratic nominee, he was going to switch to his Forward Party or whatever it was. Rob from Dedham. Demi Jor's audience is also largely that People's Party group of grifters. Really is a shame that some people who might be predisposed to left politics might actually listen to this effing idiot.
I agree.
And grift right with him. Sure, he is appealing to a new audience, but there's a core group influenced by these dum-dums, and mask is off. They aren't dumb left anymore. They're just fucking dumb. I would agree.
I feel bad for the coworker, honestly. Like, I genuinely think people like that, they only have a certain amount of time to, like, watch political stuff, and he's sucked in, and now he's, on the Andrew Yang train because of Jimmy Dore's, irresponsibility.
Sean of YouTube fame just released a video about Jimmy Dore to patrons. It's very good and will be available to everyone soon, says Mailman Paul. Check that out. I don't know if you mentioned this, but Dimmy is going on Rumble. Oh, we're going to, says, come shower with the crowd. We're going to go on Rumble too. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Probably not with the same contract.
Probably a slightly different contract. Dan Bon Micro Pinot. Hey, Sam, can I get a shofar? I just accidentally bought a 5-pound bag of the majority blend. You will not be disappointed. Iconoclast Turbate. Are you guys finally moving to the Daily Wire? It's just a matter of time, ladies and gentlemen. It's a matter of time. What should we do here? Yeah, let's do this Madison Cawthorn thing. It's going to be interesting to see, and we're going to talk about this tomorrow. We didn't go into it, but this report from the Rolling Stone, I don't know, Hunter Walker is a pretty, I have found his reporting to be pretty solid in the past. We're going to talk about this report from Rolling Stone, among other things, tomorrow as we do the news. But I think Madison Cawthorn is implicated as one of the Congress people who was apparently in contact with planners on the January 6th thing. And there was a strategy here, and we will talk more about that. But here is Cawthorn with Dartmouth activist John Cotriarella. He is at the Dartmouth College Republicans event in Hanover, New Hampshire. Dartmouth gave us some of the great luminaries like... what's her face on Fox?
Laura Ingraham.
And I think did
Dinesh D'Souza go to college with her? And they dated, so there's an image for you.
Was Ann Coulter? Did she go to Dartmouth?
Yes, he also dated Ann Coulter.
Yeah.
She's a Cornell, though. Putting up numbers. Was she Cornell? I'm not sure.
Well, maybe I'm just confusing their romantic history.
But there it is. Dartmouth is a pretty conservative place.
Yes.
And
the Ivies, maybe one of the most.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
And here is Dartmouth student activist John Cotriarella asking Madison Cawthorn a question at a college Republicans event. And this is interesting because this guy is a college Republican, and I think maybe some of the younger people realize, their party seems to be going a little bit off the rails. But
I just had a quick question for you, Congressman Cawthorn. A majority of Republicans believe that President Biden was not lawfully elected. Now, you know that he was, and that he won the 2020 election. So when will you stop lying to your constituents, admit that Donald Trump lost, and end this senseless attack on our democracy?
Well, number one, I completely wholeheartedly disagree with you. I believe the election.
On the facts, you disagree with me?
On what was that?
On the facts that President Biden was lawfully elected?
Absolutely. Well, let me go into it right quick. There is an unconstitutional election.
Love to hear you propagate the big lies.
Would you like me to?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, so as you can all see in Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution, the only people who have a right to change election law in the United States of America are the state legislatures. You saw in 6 key states, namely Wisconsin and Arizona, as the worst perpetrators. The state, the state governors and the Board of Elections there, who actually went around the will of the state legislature and changed election laws on their own. That is unconstitutional. When you have voter drop boxes that are set up in parks, when you can get rid of signature verification and voter identification laws, that is against the laws.
Addressing this stuff as we go seems a little bit ridiculous, but I just want to be clear. Nothing that he's discussing was exclusive to the presidential election. There was a tremendous amount of Republican state lawmakers, some Democratic, but more Republican state lawmakers who won under these circumstances. If you're going to say that Joe Biden was not lawfully elected because of what he's stating there, you must necessarily say the exact same thing about every single elected official who was on that ballot on that day. Period. End of story. Why they will not say that? Because, of course, it's all fucking bullshit. Yeah. But continue.
Election laws on their own. That is unconstitutional. When you have voter drop boxes that are set up in parks, when you can get rid of signature verification and voter identification laws, that is against the law. It's an unconstitutional thing. Are you against the Constitution?
Are you against, when you incited the January 6th insurrection, were you against the Constitution? When you incited the January 6th insurrection, were you against the Constitution? Or were you for it?
They're getting on the, those college Republicans there almost sound like they're rational.
Yeah, maybe it was an open meeting, so it didn't necessarily need to be college Republicans.
That guy is definitely ID'd as a college Republican?
That's where
he's not a Republican himself. Yeah. I'm sorry. I attributed some Republicans with,
Yeah, I was about to say, but it does, it maybe speaks to the fact that the Dartmouth College Republicans are to a little bit of the left of the Republican Party that they let somebody in.
I'm not as convinced. I have a feeling that was probably open and that.
Right, but my point is they had an open meeting.
Well,
they could have had a closed meeting.
It's also possible that the Dartmouth basically doesn't allow you to close it off to
That's
people.
The point. I don't know. Maybe Michael Tracy can go there and investigate.
I was gonna say.
And this guy John is the digital director for the Democrat running against Marjorie Taylor Greene. Just for some context.
Oh, okay. All right. So this guy. Okay, that I didn't.
Makes a lot more sense now.
Okay. All right. We got time for one more phone call, going a little bit late today because we can, because I don't have that other thing. Calling from a 954 area code.
Hey, this is Thomas from Richmond. Thank God.
Well, okay. Thomas, you could just thank us, but that's fine.
That's fine. Well, I mean, I had to sit through the most thorough self-cucking I've ever witnessed.
There you go. All right. I'm liking the way this call is starting to shape up. I appreciate it. Go ahead.
I am calling to kind of give like a sad take or a negative take on what could potentially be happening in Virginia.
Okay.
I'm in Richmond. So, do you guys know who Chaz Medicombe is?
No.
He's a pollster. He put out, he's been generally more positive on McAuliffe than the kind of like, I think, media framing, which is trying to make it seem tighter than it is. However, he still said, similar to 2016 with Hillary, that the GOP gubernatorial candidate, Youngkin, has something like a 34 to 40% chance of winning. And ultimately it's going to come down to turnout. And, I think with a lot of the, I travel a lot for work, I guess I should say. And since late September, I've been all over the state. And I got to say, the suburbs are bright red with Republican signs. And, I think with McAuliffe, the strategy was reconsolidate on that Biden suburban Democrat.
Right.
And that's just not what I was seeing driving all over the state.
Is it the CRT stuff? Like, we played yesterday that ad of that mother who tried to ban her the reading of the book Beloved by Toni Morrison for her senior high school student son, and they're seems like they're going full court press with some of that critical race theory stuff. It would make sense that that's appealing in some suburban neighborhoods.
Yeah, so that's part of that's actually why I called in, Emma, because I heard that yesterday, and I was thinking about calling in yesterday, but it was kind of already too late.
Okay, gotcha.
But yeah. So that I think is part of it, and I also think there's a slight risk for the Democrats because two of the other candidates who were actually positioned to win the primaries were both black women, and the entrance of Terry McAuliffe into that primary was basically kind of jarring to what I would call sort of the activist Democrat or the organizer Democrat, community organizer Democrat types who were really behind the longtime kind of centrist candidate Jennifer McClellan, who is actually a representative here in Richmond. I was actually volunteering for the slightly more center-left candidate. Her name was Carol Foy, Jennifer Carol Foy. But the sort of him entering the primary kind of sucked all the oxygen out of that, obviously. And Democratic primaries across the country are obviously more wealthy and white than the actual general electorate. But so I don't know. I just kind of wanted to put that out there. And also, I guess I should throw out while I'm on the line, they're royally fucking up the redistricting here. So the Democrats rammed through this bipartisan redistricting commission thing into our state constitution over the last 2 years.
Unbelievable.
And shock of shocks, even the Democratic consultants, the maps they were submitting were Republican gerrymanders. And even if, and it looks like the commission is actually going to go into sort of they're going to just throw up their hands and say they can't solve it, even though the Democrats are, throwing the towel in even on the commission. And it'll go to our GOP-controlled Supreme Court for them to draw the maps.
It's going to be. It is this redistricting thing. I don't want to prematurely go into the doom and gloom era that I think we're going to enter into, but the failure of Democrats to take advantage of the redistricting at this point. I mean, I'm sorry, there's just no. I guess maybe.
And they campaigned. They pushed it. It was so weird as a Democratic voter in Virginia to be told by half the Democratic caucus that yes, this bipartisan redistricting commission thing is the right thing, because we all had to vote for it on a referendum.
What is amazing is that the critique of the Democratic you hear critique of Democrats, right, as if they're an entity, and the fact of the matter is the reason why Republicans are much better at the redistricting is because they don't give a shit about their incumbents. They are looking to pick up numbers. And the incumbents don't even have the ability to enforce their own self-interest. I mean, that's the irony of all this, right? I mean, the reason why the Democrats in Virginia are doing this is because they are going to be assured of their seats that exist are going to exist and be safer for them. That's what this racket is. This is an incumbency issue. And in the Democratic Party, the incumbency supersedes the actual sort of success of the party. That's the dirty little secret. But I appreciate the call.
Yeah. Thanks.
Right. All right, some IMs and then we're out of here.
Matt Spin Doctor. Read my use my name. mattspin.com.
I'll explain it to you after the show.
Okay. Dreaming of Seder. Funny how you claim to be a dirty socialist lefty, but are looking to monetize the AM Quickie. How about my freedom to be able to get the AM Quickie without you stealing my money? Shake my head. Imagine being alone on an island and you keep seeing random help wanted posters through stapled palm trees. Sam's butt joint. Did you say Boston doesn't get that cold in January? Hollywood Sammy has forgotten what it's like to be a New Englander. Oh, please. Give me a break. Come on, don't be a wuss. Say what you will about Hitchens. That Hannity appearance when he eulogized Falwell is spectacular. Also, fun fact, apparently he would drunkenly babysit a young Olivia Wilde. Josh from Tucson. How about some flannel, Sam? Maybe a nice twill jacket for winter? Small dick energy drink. Please clip this guy's call. I need to share it with another libertarian I know, and I'm trying to get to call in. I want him to feel like he can do better because this guy was listening to Ayn Rand audiobooks while he sleeps. Also, work is fine and good. It's necessary to work for the few things we need to sustain life. Jobs, however, throw that whole concept into the sun. Jonathan Armstead, could the Peacock reported interviews best of year-end extras? You interviewed a journalist on how Dems were against the Justice Democrats primarying people on the app. Oh, yeah, something like that could happen. Maybe as a little bonus material for the members. All right, well, let's see if we can. I wanted to share it with a pal who made a documentary on Anthony Clark. Oh, I thought it was the comedian from Boston, who primaried Danny Davis here in Chicago, was talked about in your interview. Danny refused a primary debate, claiming Anthony was an unknown. Danny's campaign slogan was the name you know, the same slogan used by Eddie Murphy's con man turned politician character and distinguished gentleman. These are how these establishment folks look at the progressive primary opponents. Johnny Appleseeder. As a painter myself, I'm super psyched about the prospect of billionaires buying more paintings. Hell, I will even welcome meet 100 millionaires to visit the studio.
Also, like NFTs aren't just rich people, hiding money from taxes.
Grill Sergeant. Hi, Sam. When you were working in L.A., did you ever stay or attend any parties at the famous Chateau Marmont Hotel in Hollywood? All the stars stay there, for the interior is frequently used for filming. Unfortunately, in March 2020, the Chateau Marmont fired virtually all their non-unionized workers who had dedicated decades of their lives to the hotel without job security. Many of the hotel's workers have since spoken out about their experiences working at the hotel regarding mistreatment by management and are racially stratified. Several lawsuits have been filed. I would love to email you more about the boycott and link to the pledge if you're interested. Yes, send an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. I did stay at the Chateau Marmont, probably for a total of 4 months, maybe. Back in the day when I was doing pilots, they would put me up there for like a month at a time.
Really?
It was fantastic. It's not a fancy...
Yeah, what about it makes it... I just thought it was legendary because people stayed there. There's a nice hotel. It's a nice hotel.
I mean, it was threadbare even at the time that I was there. It was a little worn, but the rooms were big. I had the corner room was like the most coveted, and I got the corner room a couple of times. Too sweet, like a suite. And it was just... Everything was so comfortable and relaxed there. That was the thing about it. Like you just walked down and like there was not, it felt more like a high end, like almost like, I don't know, like a club. It felt like a club. And it was nice. I had fun there. I enjoyed it.
Did they film that Mad Men episode there? That's how I know of it. Anyway,
I don't know.
Regardless.
All right. 5 more IMs. But send me that thing. I haven't been there since 20 years, probably.
Is that the most famous hotel in the United States, do you think?
I think it's got to be. I
can't even think of another hotel off the top of my head.
Left-handed stranger. I'm sad. I'm turning 30 today. Anyway, Biden should just force a vote on the $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill and then get it shot down and we can know who's against the bill. We know who's against the bill and we can primary them next voting season. You're not going to vote. You're not going to primary Joe Manchin and win. And we're already going to primary Kristen Sinema, and she's going to lose. Militant apathy. Firemen turning in their boots in Washington is a stunt. They can go anywhere and get a job. My non-scientific, totally anecdotal take on New York firefighters protesting COVID vaccine mandates is that the firemen have a right-wing tilt and tend to be worse than cops. That's why when they're exposed, their actions seem a little more extreme because they're more extreme. They don't have an outlet for their rage like cops do. Did Just Coffee make pods for the non-presso machine? I don't think so. You got to get those the reusable ones. Crowder Coward, impotent guy Dan seems to think that in the libertarian world, all resources will be freely available for any individual's use, as if it's all infinitely there for the taking, no matter how much is owned privately. It's a little bit weird.
Yeah, silly.
Champagne Commie. Is it me or was Sam's misogyny a little too good? Those are some serious acting chops. Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, no, wait, what? And the final I am of the day. Chris Burdick. Sam, can you fly Matt out here to LA and have him install a button in my apartment that lets me hang up on your more insufferable colors? You clearly can no longer be trusted with that responsibility. That is an arguable truism. Matt, Bradley, Emma, great job today. Folks, we will see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better.